What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was seduced by Tsunade? In a forbidden Hokage secret. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Tsunade had been on the move for what seemed like an eternity. Days, weeks, months, years, they all began to blur together after a while. Whether or not that was because of the amount of sake the woman drank, well, she wasn't going to stop anytime soon, so that didn't matter. Her and her apprentice, they had nowhere to return to. Konoha had once been their home, but that notion seemed to slowly disintegrate with Dan's death. He was the only man Tsunade had ever come to love, and was not only Shizune's uncle but also her guardian. Shizune would never forget the day she found out about Dan's death. It was the final day of Shizune's training at the academy. She had just received her headband and ran home, eager to show her uncle the emblem that proved she was finally a ninja like him. Not only was the day special because of that, but Dan was coming home after a fortnight-long mission. It was turning into the perfect day. He had even said that he would bring her a graduation gift as a congratulations. Shizune just knew it would be great. Her uncle never let her down. After her parents died, Dan took her under his wing. That was the greatest gift she could have ever received from him and required nothing else, but he insisted. Headband in hand, the girl quickly opened the door and ran around in search of her uncle. She didn't find him but did find his girlfriend, Tsunade. Shizune was just as excited to see her though, until she took note of the sullen expression on her face. "Tsunade-chan, what's wrong? Where's Oji-san?" she implored while looking around expectantly. The second Tsunade heard Shizune's excited yet careful voice, she was brought out of her inner musings. She had been contemplating how she would tell the 9-year-old girl that her only remaining blood relative had been killed in battle. She stood up and took the few steps that were necessary to close the distance between her and Shizune and bent down so they were close to eye level. She may not have been able to save Dan, something she knew would haunt her for the rest of her life, but she would be strong for his niece. Shizune looked down when Tsunade took her small hands and held them in her own. "Tsunade-chan?" Her light voice now had a waver in it. The girl could feel her heartbeat begin to pick up. When she looked into the woman's brown eyes, she recognized the look and tried to pull away. "No," was all she said as she began to shake her head with tears springing in her eyes. Tsunade did not loosen her grip but instead pulled Shizune into a tight embrace. She needed it just as much as the girl did. From that day, Tsunade and Shizune were much closer. Tsunade took care of Shizune and eventually took her on as an apprentice. Their travels had led them all around the world. They were currently residing in a decent-sized town around the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Rivers. It was one they hadn't been to yet, but Tsunade's reputation as the legendary sucker had reached them without their presence having been there. Tsunade had an expensive bottle of sake grasped in her hand while she was looking for a casino for her to waste away her money at. Shizune had given up on trying to persuade her not to do such things a long time ago, finding it waste of energy. Tsunade would do what she wanted, but that didn't stop the younger of the two from keeping an eye on her and making sure she remained safe. The legendary sucker seemed to have a knack for finding establishments that would eagerly take her money. A familiar chuckle that signaled Tsunade found a place caused Shizune to sigh. She walked behind the blonde while carrying a pampered tauntaun in her arms. There were some places that attempted to stop them from bringing the pig inside, but a single glare from the S-class ninja stopped any further arguments from happening. She decided to head towards the slot machines first, thinking she'd try a card game next. There were 2 rows of 5 that were facing each other. None of them were occupied. The casino in general didn't have many people in it. Everyone seemed to be at the bar connected to it instead. Tsunade stuck a coin in each of the 10 and pulled the levers one at a time. The woman wasn't surprised when she lost each time. She knew she had awful luck when it came to gambling, yet she couldn't bring herself to quit the compulsive pastime. When she got to the 7th one, she could faintly hear someone asking about ramen and peeked in between 2 machines only to have her eyes widen. At first she thought she was staring at Minato, but knew that couldn't be true. The last time her and Shizune had stayed in Konoha was after the Kyuubi's attack. They attended the 4th Hokage's funeral. She had seen his body, he was dead. She looked at the sake in her hand, she hadn't even finished the bottle yet. She looked again and the blonde had disappeared. "Tsunade-sama?" Shizune questioned, seeing the bewildered look on the other woman's face. The only response Tsunade gave was a single shake of her head while taking a few generous sips from the bottle. She then continued onto the remaining 3 slot machines. Nothing. Jackpot. She stared at it for a second before coins began shooting out of their slot. She'd be excited if she wasn't cautious. The only time she won was when something bad was about to happen. Shizune did a double take when she heard the machine give the rewarding sound and let out an excited shout. Taunton even gave off a surprised squeal. Tsunade had the same expression she did when she lost. She knew that the blonde thought something bad would happen. The dark-haired woman would admit that Tsunade had terrible luck but believed everything that happened after gambling was just a coincidence. Tsunade was too stubborn to listen to her. Tsunade finished off the remaining quarter of the bottle, figuring she would need it for whatever was about to happen. They headed to the bar next. Tsunade had a new bottle in hand while Shizune nursed a lighter drink. When Tsunade's movements began to become sluggish, Shizune suggested, "We should head back to the hotel." "What?" Tsunade slurred, "but I'm just getting started." She punctuated the sentence by gulping down more of the alcohol. Shizune had an idea and smirked, knowing Tsunade's habit wouldn't allow her to turn it down. "How about a bet then?" Tsunade perked up at that. She had already won a jackpot, maybe she'd win this too. Nothing bad had happened yet either. In her mind, luck seemed to be on her side. "Go on. If you can make it to the hotel without assistance, no trouble at all, then I'll buy you 5 bottles of whatever kind of alcohol you want." Tsunade hummed for a second. Alcohol wasn't very expensive, but 5 bottles would last her at the least a couple of days. Deal, she tried to say in an even voice, but even she could hear the unsteadiness of it. Their hotel was an estimated 10-minute walk from the casino per bar. Tsunade was determined to win the bet. She had stumbled slightly when she got off the bar stool too eagerly, but her apprentice luckily did not catch the movement. She didn't think so, at least. One step then another, that's all the blonde was focusing on. She started to wonder if she was thinking too much about it, telling herself that she hadn't even drank that much. When they were about a block away, a loud voice startled her out of her concentration, causing her to trip over her own feet. She caught herself and looked in the direction of the sound. "You're a long way from home, kid," a man said. Tsunade could hear chuckling from other people after it was said. She had to guess that there were 4 people in total, including the loud one. "Hey, I'm not a kid." Something about the voice was familiar to Tsunade. Tsunade looked at her apprentice before quietly ordering, "Stay here." Shizune of course didn't listen and stealthily followed after the other woman. She had heard the beginning of the fight too, but figured Tsunade would just leave it be as she did with the rest of the late-night fights. Tsunade peered around the edge of a building into an alley just in time to see the same blonde from the casino yell, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." That jutsu had been made forbidden after the death of her grand-uncle, the second Hokage. How this young person knew it Tsunade wasn't sure of, but she didn't have time to dwell on the matter. She stepped out from behind her corner just in time to see the boy and his clones rushing the 3 men. "Is there a problem here?" Tsunade asked with her arms crossed under her chest. Her voice didn't come off as slurred this time, she wouldn't allow it to be. The 4 people froze and looked at her. "Big boobs, check. Most likely drunk, check. Looks young, check. Casino and bar nearby, check." Naruto had finally found her. He had been looking for 3 weeks and he finally found the Sannin. Jiraiya had told him what to look for and the best areas to search in an effort to cut down on his travel time. Jiraiya had told him that they were going to train. Naruto had picked up on a weird vibe from the man, different from the pervy one that he always gave off. He seemed desperate. Naruto agreed, of course, eager to get stronger, and followed Jiraiya. They didn't go to the training grounds but instead outside of the village's gates. When they got a decent distance away, the sage pulled Naruto off the worn path and behind a tree. "What?" Jiraiya stopped him from talking by placing a hand over his mouth. Naruto glared at him but stayed quiet nonetheless. After the man seemed to finish checking his surroundings, he looked at Naruto and spoke in hushed tones. "I have a mission for you." Naruto immediately got excited and was about to say something but was once again hushed. "Your mission is to find the last of the Sannin, Tsunade." Before Naruto could try to question him, Jiraiya quickly continued. "As you know, a new Hokage is needed. Most of the council and I want her, but there are others that want the title." Danzo Shimura, he rivaled the third Hokage. If he is put in control of Konoha then, well, that would take too long to explain. A lot of people would be less safe, especially you. A million questions were racing through Naruto's mind. He wanted to say something but Jiraiya spoke some more. I have to remain here to keep the council at bay. I spoke to the ones that support Tsunade and they said I have a month to find Tsunade. However, they often choose to take easy routes out in times of need like this. With Orochimaru and Akatsuki scheming, I can't take the chance of leaving and having Danzo take the chance to persuade them to his side while I'm gone. Naruto now looked determined and nodded his head once. Jiraiya took a breath before continuing. She is not the easiest person to find if you don't know how to. Her nickname is the legendary Sucker. Walk up to any casino and mention that name, they'll be able to tell you if she was there recently. The later it is in the day, the more likely she'll be drunk. She has an apprentice, Shizune, she will most likely be with her. She is my age but uses a jutsu to keep her appearance young. And finally, the most important thing, he boobs, they're ginormous like nothing you've ever seen. You can't miss them. Naruto finally found a break in between Jiraiya talking to say a few words of his own. How am I supposed to convince her to come? Jiraiya smirked, not many people knew this trick. Make a bet with her, she never wins. Naruto was remembering all of this now. His guard had momentarily been let down, however, and he regretted it the moment he felt the blade of a kunai enter his waist from behind. He let out a struggled cry at the feeling of his flesh being ripped apart to allow an entrance for the blade. At the same time, a different kunai was thrown at Tsunade, who easily evaded it and caught the ring at the end of the handle around her index finger before hurling it at the same person who had thrown it at her. The particular man, of course, had no time to move out of the way and it hit him between the eyes. Shizune quickly dispersed Senbon and took down the remaining two men. Tsunade heard something clatter to the ground. When she looked down, there was a bloodied kunai knife. The sight of the liquid made her halt in all of her movements. Her head felt fuzzy, stomach nauseous, and breathing was accompanied with difficulty. Shizune rushed forward to help, knowing about Tsunade's fear of blood. After so many years it still hadn't gone away. It was one of the reasons she usually avoided fights like the one that just happened. No, Tsunade ordered softly. She forced herself forwards until she was beside the blonde and knelt down. Carefully, the woman turned him over so the injury would not be further aggravated. His back had more blood than the front of his torso. Another wave of nausea hit the medic Nin, but she further suppressed it. Shizune looked on worriedly. Tsunade-sama, I've got it. Tsunade replied with a slight stutter. She didn't know what it was, but something made her want to help the blonde. Her hands glowed a soft green as she began pouring medical chakra into Naruto's body. The kunai had gone all the way through his body, but it was a clean cut and hadn't missed any vital spots, so it wasn't extremely difficult to heal. After a few minutes the wound had been reduced to a thin pink scar. It was the best Tsunade could do. She turned him back over at the perfect moment to see his eyes squeeze together tightly before squinting open. Shizune looked at him from behind Tsunade. Something felt familiar to her, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Suddenly Naruto shot to his feet and said, "Come on, we gotta go." Shizune looked at Naruto through narrowed eyes while Tsunade quirked a brow at him before replying, "I just saved your ass. The least you could give me is a thank you, brat." Naruto glared at the slug princess. "First of all, I didn't need you to heal me." After a scoff from Tsunade he muttered, "Baka Ero Senin, didn't tell me you'd be so stubborn." Pervy sage, Tsunade thought to herself before a sudden realization hit her. There was only one person he could be talking about. Jiraiya? She hadn't seen him since the Kyuubi attacked the Hidden Leaf Village, and that had been what? Almost 14 years ago now. She was too drunk to think about him and whatever he wanted at the moment, though she wouldn't admit that out loud. "Listen, brat," Naruto growled, very much so annoyed. "My name isn't Brat, it's Uzumaki Naruto." Both Tsunade and Shizune's eyes widened when they finally realized why the boy looked so familiar. The golden blonde hair, bright blue eyes, short temper, it all made sense. He was the son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina, the legacy of the fourth Hokage. Hearing about Jiraiya trying to find her for whatever reason made her head spin, and having Naruto in front of her just made Tsunade feel like too much was happening too fast. "Tsunade-sama," Shizune exclaimed at the same time as Naruto let out an oof against the wall of the building closest to them. Tsunade had pushed Naruto away from her and turned the opposite direction in time to avoid puking on him. Her being not so sober caused her to use too much force and she ended up flinging him into said wall. Naruto was left gasping for air. When he finally regained his breath he stopped himself from muttering out an "ew." Jiraiya had left out how strong the woman was and didn't want to be flung into another wall. After she was done, Tsunade turned back around and stared at Naruto for a moment, trying to figure out what to do with him. She ended up deciding that she was too tired to make any decisions right now and would do so in the morning. "Help me up, brat," she said while holding out her hand. Naruto rolled his eyes and glared at the blonde. "I already told you, Naruto, my name is Uzumaki Naruto, yes I know. Now help me up, brat," the woman ordered again. Shizune watched the two interact in a somewhat amused manner before moving to pick up Taunton. "Fine," Naruto ground out while rolling his eyes. "Ba-chan." He couldn't help but think to himself, two people could play the nickname game. A triumphant smirk graced his face as he reached out to help Tsunade up, but it dropped the moment she grabbed his hand in a vice-like grip. Tsunade pulled herself up, knowing full well of how strong her hold on his hand was. Shizune now looked at the two with wide eyes instead of amused ones. She had witnessed Tsunade throwing grown men through walls for less. Tsunade had her arm around Naruto. She had already lost the bet with her apprentice, so there was no point, in her mind, to struggle with her feet the rest of the way back to the hotel. "Just so you know, I'm not going anywhere tonight," Tsunade mumbled with a slur. Naruto quickly turned his head to her. They only had a week left to get back to Konoha and he hadn't even convinced her to go yet. But Shizune just shook her head. "She's not going to budge, Naruto." The boy just threw his head back and groaned. On the positive side, at least one of the women was calling him by his actual name. Tsunade was half awake when they reached her and Shizune's hotel room. It was a decent size with two beds pushed up against the wall, a small love seat in the corner, and had a connected bathroom. After putting Taunton on the chair, Shizune gestured at the bed closest to the restroom. "You can just put her there." The second Tsunade hit the bed she was out cold. Shizune took her sandals off. Both her and Naruto had already taken theirs off when they entered the room, and placed them by the door. She then threw the half off the blanket that Tsunade wasn't laying on over her so she wouldn't get cold. The last thing Shizune did was grabbing a rag from the bathroom and wetting it so she could wipe off the leftover blood from Tsunade's hands. When she turned around she saw Naruto standing awkwardly by the door. "Do you have a place to stay?" Shizune asked. From what she heard, the dark-haired woman was able to put two and two together and assumed the boy had been searching for them for at least a short while now. She wouldn't be surprised if he had nowhere to sleep. Naruto laughed awkwardly before scratching the back of his neck. "Not really." Shizune thought about it for a second. "You can stay here. I don't take up much room, you can share my bed if you want." She chuckled when she saw an immediate blush creep onto Naruto's cheeks. "Don't worry, I'm not trying to seduce you or anything. I prefer my men a bit older." Naruto cleared his throat before nodding shyly. He hadn't been thinking that at all. It was that he just never shared a bed with anyone before. Anytime he went on a mission with Team 7 they always had their own sleeping bags, and anytime he traveled with Jiraiya they always had separate rooms, which he was honestly glad about. Shizune threw the rag away, not wanting to take the chance of Tsunade seeing the blood on it, even if it wasn't much, before laying down on the side closest to Tsunade. Naruto slid onto the other side and was practically hugging the edge of the bed. "Do you think she'll remember all of this?" Naruto asked. Shizune sleepily replied, "She is not the forgetful kind of drunk. She'll remember. Good night, Naruto." "Good night," was all the blonde said, feeling quite tired himself. When Tsunade woke up the next morning she was gifted with a raging headache and thought that all of the events that occurred the night before were just a part of some crazy dream. That was until she saw Naruto sitting on the love seat, sipping on a cup of tea while Shizune did the same on the other bed. "Oh fuck," Tsunade groaned. It was real, she thought while massaging the side of her temples. Shizune chuckled softly. Like she told Naruto, Tsunade wouldn't forget, but she did wonder if the woman would believe it really happened. "Well, good morning to you too, Ba-chan." He made sure to stretch out the Ba-chan, knowing it got on Tsunade's nerves. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. You have 5 minutes to try to convince me before I kick your ass out. She sat against the headboard with her arms crossed, waiting for whatever he had to say. Language, Shizune groaned. If I'm going to possibly be traveling with him, then he better get used to it, Tsunade responded, eyes never leaving the blonde. Clock is ticking. We need you to become Hokage, Naruto blurted out. Shizune looked at him with wide eyes, Taunton squealed, and Tsunade she just looked at him with an indifferent expression. No, was all the legendary ninja replied with. Only a fool who wants to die would become Hokage. That hit a spot deep inside Naruto. Shut up, he began with a raised tone. A drunk like you would be lucky to become Hokage. He ignored the deadly glare Tsunade sent his way and continued. To be Hokage, that is my dream, and I'll accomplish that dream, you better believe it. I never go back on my word, that's my ninja way, so you know I'll get it done. Dan, Nawaki. If the village wanted her, then that must mean the old man died as well. Images of these people sprung up inside of Tsunade's head. Some were good, most of them were haunting. Her lover and brother had dreamed of becoming Hokage, her sensei had been the third. Tsunade thought Naruto would understand, having his father die for Konoha. Then a sudden flashback hit her. What's going to happen to the boy? Tsunade asked her former teammate. They were still dressed all in black, having just finished Minato's funeral. The third promised Kushina that he would keep an eye on him, Jiraiya answered quietly. Tsunade considered the response. I can't believe I'm saying this, but what about you? Aren't you his godfather? When she looked at Jiraiya, he had a sad look on his face. I can't, for the same reason I can't be Hokage. You know they already asked me? The fourth hasn't even been dead for 4 days yet. When he saw that his attempt to change the subject didn't work, he sighed and continued. I don't deserve either. My life has been full of failures. I can't risk to fail in raising him too. The two found a bench and sat down. Silence passed between them until the sage spoke again. I spoke to the third. We decided it would be safest to keep Naruto's birth on the down low. The old man is ordering everyone to keep quiet about his lineage. Tsunade nodded, it made sense, but there seemed to be something that he was leaving out. Enough people wanted to kill the Yellow Flash himself, and now that he was dead they would want to kill his legacy as well. She however did not expect the next thing that the man said. He will not know of his lineage until his 15th birthday. If he were to tell anyone beyond the village, word could spread and Minato's enemies could plan an attack. Tsunade wondered what would happen if he knew. Would he still want to become Hokage? Probably. He seemed like a fool. How old are you? She quizzed nonchalantly. Naruto groaned loudly. Even Shizune was looking at Tsunade with confused eyes. What's that have to do with? Just answer the question, Tsunade requested. Because of the reason behind the question she wouldn't demand anything, but it would be a good idea to know. Naruto threw his head back before quickly pulling it back up. A month away from 15, happy now? When he received a single nod he continued. The longer he spoke the quicker his words became. Listen, some guy named Naruto face palmed, this was the worst time to forget. Oh yeah, Danzo. He is trying to become the 5th Hokage, but no one wants him to be one. If that was enough to put Ero Sennin on edge, then it's enough to put me on edge. He took a breath before continuing. I don't know anything about him, but I'm guessing he's in. Naruto paused, looking for the right word. An ass? Yes, he is. Go on, Tsunade said with the wave of her hand. For once she could agree with Jiraiya. Danzo is Hokage. Well, long story short, he did not agree with the third. Too much would change, and she didn't think it would be for the better. The next reason isn't one Jiraiya sent me for. At this point the boy was fiddling with his thumbs. I may not be very smart, but I have heard about you mainly from Jiraiya, and note everything was pervy. After receiving a dry chuckle he continued. I know you're a medical ninja, and supposedly a really good one. He still ignored the fact that she had healed him the night before. There's 2 people in the hospital that no one knows how to heal. They're both my friends. One of them got hurt during the Chunin exam and the other was injured while fighting an Akatsuki member. Tsunade contemplated what to do. For whatever reason she wanted to help Naruto, but she still didn't want to become Hokage. She had heard whispers of the group, but didn't know what they would want with a couple of young genin. Naruto recalled what Jiraiya said, about the trick to getting Tsunade to do whatever he wanted. Tell you what, how about a bet? Shizune smirked and shook her head, lightly enough so that the other 2 wouldn't notice. She rubbed her mouth in an effort to hide the grin that it held. Jiraiya must have told him the key to Tsunade, she thought. If I win, then you have to become the 5th Hokage, if you win. I don't know, you tell me, Naruto proposed. The clock had stopped ticking the moment he suggested a bet and everyone knew it. Tsunade thought about what she would ask for. There was nothing she wanted, but there were things she was curious about. Alright, we have a deal, but… Yes, Naruto yelled with an arm pump. But, Tsunade continued, you have to answer a question first. Naruto scratched his head. Fine, what is it? Since the previous night, Tsunade had been making connections with the boy, even though she wasn't sober the entire time. She just wanted her hunch to be confirmed. Are you the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki? Naruto looked at her, clearly confused. Everyone from the village seemed to know, that's why they all hated him and why growing up was hell. Now he had to tell 2 people who would probably hate him just as much as everyone else when they found out. He placed his elbows on his knees and bent over so he could put his head on his hands. Tsunade couldn't figure out what caused the sudden change in the boy's mood. She remembered when her grandmother was the Jinchuriki, it was viewed as a sacrifice made to protect the village. She was proud to be able to help people. Yes, he could feel himself shaking but couldn't manage to stop himself. He was just waiting for them to do whatever would be done since they found out the truth about him. Some people had thrown rocks, others had pushed him around, which after a while began to start a fair amount of fights, and others just completely acted as if he didn't exist. Shizune moved closer to him and sat on the arm of the chair while putting a hand on his shoulder. Hey Naruto, are you okay? The boy in question looked up cautiously. Don't you hate me now? Both of the women's eyes pushed together in a confused way. Shizune's head tilted to the side while Tsunade stood up and went to sit on the edge of the bed that was closer to Naruto. Why would we hate you? Tsunade asked while leaning forward in anticipation. His voice was barely audible, but with strained ears he could be heard. Because everyone else does. After a shuddered breath he added, especially the adults, they hate me the most. According to Ero Sennin, Danzo is the worst. Jiraiya couldn't really get into it, there wasn't a lot of time. A long sigh followed. He said the council gave him a month. He thought it was too risky to leave the council alone with Danzo, so I was sent alone instead. Tsunade was fuming inwardly. She couldn't help but think that she should have probed further when she sensed that her former teammate was hiding something all those years ago. The legendary ninja had half the mind to go to Konoha just so she could kick Jiraiya's ass. She didn't know what she would have done if she had known, but thought that she could have at least done something. If anyone had the slightest chance of understanding what Naruto would have to live with, it would be her, since she was directly related to a former Nine-Tails holder. How much time do you have left to get back to the village? Tsunade asked through tight lips, having to use some effort to force her anger down so Naruto wouldn't think it was being directed at him. Including today, 6 days, Naruto replied with a stronger voice than before. Tsunade carefully considered what she would say next. I'll go with you. He immediately perked up at that. Really? He practically yelled while jumping out of the chair. But, oh come on. Naruto groaned. Tsunade shook her head with a small smile. A bet is a bet. The bet is for you to do something impossible. Make me believe that you can become Hokage. I will travel with you to Konoha in case you actually manage to pull it off. If you don't by the time we reach the gates, then I will tell you what I want. Naruto had a new sense of determination fill him. Deal, let's go. When he turned around to head towards the door, Tsunade shook her head with a smile, making her believe anything would be very difficult. The smile on her face dropped, however, when she saw the back of his still bloodied clothes. She felt nauseous as well as a sense of anxiety, but it was more bearable than what she dealt with the night before. Before I go anywhere with you, you've got to get a new pair of clothes. On that she would not budge. What? Naruto whined before looking at the parts of his jacket that was in tatters. Oh, he laughed awkwardly while rubbing his head. I don't really have any money on me. I kinda used it on a bowl of ramen yesterday. Tsunade had plenty, even if she was gambling almost constantly. It was one of the perks of having the entire Senju fortune left to her. I'll pay for them, I just can't look at those anymore. Oh what? Naruto asked mockingly, you scared of blood? He regretted it the moment he said it, having missed Shizune's gesturing to stop talking. When he felt the temperature around him drop several degrees, he gulped heavily. Point taken. I think I saw a place on the way out of the village. Tsunade smiled and in a chirpy tone replied, "Great," as she led the way out. Naruto looked at Shizune and whispered, "That was the scariest 2 seconds of my life." She chuckled before replying in a more serious tone, "Everyone has their problems. Bring hers up and she won't hesitate to flick you across town." Naruto couldn't help but shiver at the image Shizune's words put in his head. Tsunade flung him into a wall the previous night without the intention of even doing so. He didn't know how far he'd go if she actually tried. He opted to remain at the tail of the group so Tsunade would not be able to see the leftover blood. When they entered the small clothing shop, Tsunade asked the man behind the front corner if they had anything for ninjas and he directed them to the back of the building. "Got anything orange?" Tsunade shook her head. "Nice try, but no, you need something that will provide better stealth. Orange is too bright of a color and too easy to spot." She rolled her eyes when she saw him stick his bottom lip out in a pout. While Naruto browsed the clothing, Shizune leaned towards Tsunade and quietly asked, "What will you ask for if he loses?" Tsunade looked at Naruto. He was busy looking through different items of clothing and was convinced he wasn't paying either of them any attention. In an equally quiet tone she replied, "It's more a matter of what happens when we reach the village. If Danzo is already Hokage, then I will tell Naruto he is to come with us and that will fulfill his end of the bet." Shizune looked at Tsunade with a bewildered expression. She could tell Naruto was stubborn. With him and Tsunade together constantly, they'd be sure to butt heads. On top of that, the woman had never wanted anyone else to travel with them, let alone a 14-year-old boy. However, Shizune did think that he could do some good for her elder. Maybe his upbeat, energetic attitude could bring back a light long lost to Tsunade. She felt like she could already see a difference, considering the blonde hadn't drank even a single sip of alcohol that day and it was close to noon. "How about a compromise?" Naruto asked after a few minutes. He held up a black jacket and a matching pair of pants, both more fitted than what he currently had on, but enough space remained to still be able to move around freely. The last thing was an orange tank top. Tsunade looked at the three items with a quirk of her head. As long as his jacket was at least partially zipped, he'd be decently hidden, more so than his almost completely orange jumpsuit. She nodded, causing Shizune to head to the counter to pay and Naruto to a dressing room to change. If the legendary sucker was not gambling, then her apprentice held onto whatever money they had in an effort to dissuade her from doing so, or so she thought. Just before she was about to leave, a certain symbol caught Tsunade's eye. It wasn't widely known, but her eyes managed to recognize it anyway. "Give me a second, I'll be out in a moment," Tsunade said. Her apprentice pulled the blonde boy away before he had the chance to argue. She picked up the item and took it to the cashier and then took out some emergency money that was always kept hidden away safely in her bra, usually reserved for gambling. Even Shizune didn't know it was there. After she purchased it, Tsunade put the item in the bag that was currently slung over her shoulder. She exited the shop to see an antsy-looking Naruto and slightly amused Shizune. "Ready?" she asked. For a second, everything was black, then Naruto opened his eyes and color burst all around him. The strange thing was that he didn't recognize his surroundings. He stood, not even realizing that he had been sitting down. The most bizarre thing about the whole ordeal was that he wasn't controlling his movements. It was as if he was on autopilot. He was following someone, except not simply following but sprinting along with them. Naruto wasn't sure what was supposed to be going on, but a sudden feeling of dread overcame him, like something he had never felt before. Wherever they were, it looked like some sort of compound. The second they left, he immediately recognized his surroundings. They were in Konoha. He didn't recognize a single person around him, and couldn't move his head to look around. All he knew was that there was an awful feeling in the pit of his stomach. The more people that noticed him and his companion, the more everyone began to part. After what couldn't have been more than a few minutes, the two ended up in front of the hospital. It looked the same as Naruto remembered it to, except cleaner, newer. Finally, the person leading Naruto directed him to a hall with a single room at the end of it. He could feel his heart rate increase exponentially. He burst into the room and there were 5 medical ninjas surrounding a table with a patient on it. His feet took him to the operating table. The 5 people that were around it all moved away with solemn expressions. He was looking upon a bloodied, bruised, and burnt man, who strangely enough was the only person that he could get an actual sense of familiarity from. The longer he looked, the more his heart began to feel as if it was breaking. He sunk to his knees, tears were pouring down his cheeks. He looked up and the man's hand was hanging from the table. Naruto reached up and held it. His own hand was unrecognizable to him, it was too feminine, the fingers too slender. Lady Mito, do? No. His own voice was unrecognizable as well. He wasn't being called by his own name. Something wasn't right. Everything felt off. Suddenly everything began to fade away just as quickly as it came. He felt cold. There were the gentle touches of hands and then, Naruto. He shot up, his breath labored like he had forgotten how to breathe. The feeling of despair and pain finally began to seep away. He reached up and touched his face, the tears were real this time. He put his head in his hands, desperately waiting for his heart to slow down. There was a soft touch on his shoulder. He turned and saw a wide-eyed Tsunade. Shizune was peering at him from over the other woman's shoulder. Both of them sported wide eyes and worried looks. "Hey," Tsunade said in a soft voice. "Are you okay?" They had made a good amount of distance their first day and decided to make camp once they had to squint just to see. The trio decided on 4-hour shifts with Tsunade going first, Shizune following, and Naruto taking up the last one. When Tsunade was about to wake her apprentice for her turn, Naruto began to squirm. After she shook Shizune, the squirming increased into thrashing and he started to whimper. Her and Shizune headed towards Naruto and tried to wake him, but it was to no avail. After a few minutes he had shot up on his own and that led them to where they currently were. "I had some type of dream, at least I think it was a dream," Naruto said with a slightly glazed over expression. "It felt too real though, and I wasn't me. I was someone else, some lady." He grasped his hair in fists, trying to recall the woman's name. "Mako, Mayo." He was getting frustrated. "Miso? No. Damn it. Mito?" Tsunade asked. She was hoping it wasn't Mito. Shizune looked at her, then at Naruto again, but this time expectantly. Naruto finally put his hands down, some relief showing through in his eyes. "Yes, her. Who is she?" She. Tsunade got choked up, but she refused to show it and opted to remain quiet. The woman hadn't thought about her grandmother in years, and all of a sudden happy memories from her childhood came back to her. Her grandma, grandpa, parents, brother, they all just ambushed her. Shizune took this as her chance to speak up, seeing as how Tsunade responded, or rather her lack of being able to. Mito was Tsunade's grandmother, the first Hokage's wife, and It finally clicked for him, why the man in his dream looked so familiar to him. He was there, the first Hokage, except. What was happening? Tsunade, who was now squatting in front of him, implored. He was. Mito, she was running to the hospital and went into this room. He was there, the first Hokage. Some medical ninjas had been working on him, but they couldn't help. He remembered what Shizune told him. Tsunade didn't need to know anything else, even if it was just a dream. Instead he turned his head back to Shizune and asked, "What else were you going to say?" Tsunade was the one to answer, having regained her voice. She was the first Jinchuriki to the 9 tails. Naruto felt several things at hearing that. Relief for not being the first, confusion over not being the first, and multiple other things he couldn't put a finger on. After a few minutes of allowing him to gather his thoughts, Tsunade asked, "Is this the first time you saw someone else's memory?" She could see both positive and negative things coming from this revelation. The positive being the boy would have the chance to be able to get to know who his parents were, and the negative meaning the 9 tails must have had something to do with it. "I don't get it. Why?" Naruto groaned. He didn't understand why it happened. A familiar chuckle sounded in Naruto's head. "I remember everything that occurred when the past 2 acted as vessels to keep me contained." You sensed something familiar and pulled a memory from that. "What's that supposed to mean?" Naruto growled out loud. The 2 medical ninjas stared at him with confused expressions. "Figure it out," was the only vague response he received. Anytime he spoke to the fox he was always left lost and irritated afterwards. Naruto stood up and marched towards the fire that was only a few feet in front of him. "I'll take the second watch. You two get some sleep." Seeing as how he probably needed to sort out his thoughts, Tsunade and Shizune just went with it, putting their questions away for a later time. The blonde stayed awake for the remainder of the night, never having woke Shizune for her shift to keep watch. As usual, the dark-haired woman ended up waking before Tsunade and stood to head over and rest by the fire with Naruto. You never woke me, was all she said. Naruto shrugged. I had a lot to think about, have a lot to think about. There was no point in trying to sleep, wanted to make myself useful. You know you can talk to one of us, right? Shizune replied with a small smile. Naruto shook his head with a less genuine one. His smile looked like something that had been rehearsed more than once. It's okay, I'm used to being alone. The fire began to act as a trance of sorts for him. The colors just kept pulling him in. I grew up that way, alone and hated for who I am, or rather what's in me. He heard someone plop down on the other side of him, which could only be one other person. Tsunade put her arm around him and pulled him into her side. Well, guess what, brat, you're not alone anymore. I've got something to tell you, but let's clean up camp first. Naruto put out the fire while the other two took care of their sleeping bags. After he was done, he did the same. Once they began their trek for the day, Tsunade signaled for Shizune to take the lead. After her and Naruto were a decent distance away from Shizune, she began to speak. I was serious about what I said. You are not alone anymore. Her eyes remained on him as she waited for a reply. Naruto sighed. I don't have a family. I've never met any of them. I graduated and got assigned to my team and finally learned what it was like to have a friend. Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi-sensei. I consider them my friends. Well, Sakura I would like to consider more than a friend, but she hates me half of the time. They aren't people I go home to. I've never had anyone like that, no mom or dad, not even a cousin. Tsunade took this as her time to speak up. That's not entirely true. You might be the last known Uzumaki, but you're not the last to share the Uzumaki blood. Naruto looked at her with a mix of confusion and hope in his eyes. What do you mean? You know how in clans almost everyone is related in some way? After a nod she continued, well, it took a few seconds to figure out the right words to say. Mito, my grandmother, the person's memory you saw, her full name was Uzumaki Mito. Naruto stopped in place. One foot was still sticking out in front of the other, as if he could continue walking at any time. So you are my. He was unsure of his and the other blonde's relationship now. Tsunade had to think through her family tree for a moment to give Naruto an accurate answer. That would make me your. She moved her finger around as if she was trying to shift through the tree's branches. Your great aunt, no, your cousin, yeah, we're cousins. Naruto's eyes looked as if they were about to water, until he smirked and asked, does that mean I'm gonna turn into an alcoholic gambler too? A hand was thrown at him, but he ducked and stuck his tongue out. If Tsunade wanted to hit the blonde, she would have done so. She just squinted her eyes instead, feigning anger, causing Naruto to laugh and run ahead to Shizune. After smiling to herself for a moment at Naruto's antics, she picked up her pace to meet up with the two. The moment she finally caught up, Naruto turned on his heel and smacked into her. The force of the impact caused him to bounce off of her boobs and he ended up on the ground. Naruto looked up at Tsunade with a bright red face. Her having to bend over slightly so she could see his face over her boobs did not help the situation. Shizune ended up having to turn around with a hand to her mouth so her laughter could be stifled. We should keep going if we want to make it there on time, Shizune said when she was sure she wouldn't laugh while saying so. Naruto cleared his throat and stood up, more than ready to get out of the awkwardness he had caused by not paying attention to his surroundings. After an hour or two passed, Naruto's stomach began to grumble and he started to whine about food. Would you stop complaining already? Ninjas should know how to pack for a long trip. Shizune rolled her eyes, thinking, there they go again. She had been able to get them to stop their bickering a couple of minutes before, but it didn't last long, seeing as how the two had made a full circle back to where they had begun. For the last time, I didn't know how long it would take to find you. A slight curiosity came over Shizune, making her wonder which of the two, Naruto or Tsunade, would win in a yelling match. She didn't really want to find out, but that's the direction things were heading. While she had made sure to remain a decent amount of paces in front of the two, they could still easily be heard. Her relief came in the form of a berry bush. After closer inspection and determining whether or not it was poisonous, she picked off as many of the berries as she could. Naruto was about to respond to the latest thing Tsunade said when something small and semi-squishy bounced off of his forehead. He picked it up and realized it was a berry. When he looked up, he saw Shizune waving a pouch in front of him, of what he could only assume held more berries. Thanks, he exclaimed and took the bag eagerly. The following days went similar to the first two. Tsunade and Naruto would come up with something to bicker about and Shizune would find a way to calm the pair down. The third day Tsunade surprised herself by waking up before her traveling buddies and found them snuggling or as snuggled up as they could be while in separate sleeping bags. She was still getting to know Naruto, but Shizune had always been a person to chill easily and the nights had only been getting colder. On the fourth day Naruto got some kind of rash on parts of his hands, which most likely would have stretched further if he wasn't wearing a jacket. "I told you not to look in that bush," Tsunade chastised. Yeah, Naruto grumbled. Tsunade refused to use her medical ninjutsu to make the rash go away for two reasons. 1. He should have listened in the first place, and 2. The fox's chakra would heal him soon enough anyway. Once the fifth day came around Tsunade began to feel antsy. She hadn't gambled since they departed for the trip and her emergency alcohol stores had been depleted by the second day. Since they were traveling on the quickest route no towns had been passed, but they were set to pass through one by nightfall. Naruto spent the day arguing. Tsunade wanted to stop and gamble away the remainder of the money they had while getting wasted while Naruto wanted to travel through the night. "Konoha has casinos too," Naruto said exasperatedly. This round of bickering had been going on since Tsunade woke up. That morning Naruto quickly found that there was an unusual spring in the woman's step, and when he questioned her about it she told him about the town. That led them to the present. Tsunade sighed, he was too young to understand the beauty of gambling and alcohol. "For the last time, brat, I am more than aware that Konoha has casinos as well. Their casinos however are far, while the one coming up is close." "Tsunade-sama," Shizune butted in. "There is a bit of a time limit we have to adhere to or all of this will have been pointless. Just think about it, if we don't make it on time then you will have gone all this time without your favorite activities for nothing." Naruto looked at Shizune thankfully before turning hope-filled eyes towards the blonde. If one thing would have convinced her that would be it. "Fine," Tsunade grumbled before adding, "but only if I get to buy some sake while we're in town." Naruto yipped while jumping with a fist in the air, which was enough of a sign that he agreed to stop further arguments. Shizune wanted to argue and tell Tsunade that the sake wasn't exactly necessary, but if there was anything she learned about her travels with the other woman was that small victories were sometimes the best you could get. The sun was setting in shades of pink when the trio finally reached the town. Tsunade took a couple of minutes to select her sake and looked at the casino with a solemn expression when it was past. The next several hours included the remainder of the journey back to Konoha. They had after all decided it would be best to travel throughout the night. While they were tired, Naruto, Tsunade, and Shizune also wanted to get off their feet in a way that didn't include sleeping on the dirt. Moments passed when Tsunade wanted to down a bottle in preparation for their arrival but decided against it each time, in case she needed to act quickly for whatever reason. If they got to the village and all was well then she'd go ahead and drink every last bottle and hit all of the casinos until she was too exhausted to do anything else. As her steps took her and her companions closer to the Hidden Leaf village, Tsunade's heart quickened as well. Each time she recognized this, the woman only wanted to drink that much more. Shizune cast glances at Tsunade every now and then, knowing that her mentor was most likely anxious for lack of a better word, but knew asking would only result in denial from the blonde. Every time the dark-haired kunoichi looked at Naruto he was as energetic as ever. It was pitch black, minus the faint glow from the moon, when the trio reached the tall, red gates of Konoha. They hadn't seen any other ninjas or villagers at that, but Tsunade knew they must have been sighted by now if not then a new Hokage really was needed. As she looked up at the wall surrounding the village several memories of returning from missions with her former team ambushed her, along with ones of her family and ones of Dan. Movement caught her eye, but Tsunade just missed a masked figure disappear into the shadows and figured it had been a bird. The streets were scarce of life, since it was early in the morning no one found this too suspicious. Naruto looked up and was glad to recognize the familiar surroundings, without them being a part of a dream. All he wanted was some miso ramen from Ichiraku's. He frowned however when he realized that it was too early for the ramen shop to be open. Before he could dwell for long an arm shot out of the alley he was about to pass and pulled him into it. As Tsunade turned the corner she chastised herself for not recognizing the shrouded figure she had seen for what it was. The scene she was met with was not the one she expected to see. "Sakura!" Naruto yelled while hugging his teammate. He had been ready to pommel her until he recognized the pink hair. "Shush," Sakura whispered just loud enough to still be considered quiet. Her eyes darted behind the blonde when Tsunade and Shizune appeared behind him in defensive stances, both being ready to act in a moment's notice. They settled when they saw Naruto's arms still wrapped around her. "Naruto, you have to get out of here, it isn't safe," Sakura added. While the reason for Sakura's words hadn't dawned on Naruto, it had on Tsunade and Shizune. Their suspicions were quickly confirmed by Sakura's wary side-to-side glances. "What? Why?" Naruto asked, not as loud as before but still enough to be shushed by the three people that were surrounding him. Sakura became more desperate, and it showed through in her voice. "Please, Naruto, just come with me." Seeing as how the boy wasn't going to be moving anytime soon on his own, Tsunade nudged his shoulder forward. It wasn't rough but not exactly gentle either. He stopped again after a few steps. "Wait, was I too late? Did I fail?" It finally hit Naruto, that was the only reason he could think of that would lead to Sakura's urgency. It felt like a sudden weight had been placed onto his shoulders. He didn't know what to do. Was he supposed to obey whatever Danzo told him to do? Was he supposed to leave? He was lost, utterly lost. Tsunade was tempted to swipe one of Shizune's senbon and prick Naruto with it just to make him stop talking, but then they'd have to carry his dead weight. She instead urged him forwards once again, this time a bit more forcefully, and not knowing what else to do he obliged in silence. Sakura led the three into one of the slum neighborhoods. Normally Tsunade would be cautious of predatory gazes, even if the men had no chance of laying a single finger on her, but there was not a single person in sight. They went into another alley that was between two of the smaller buildings before entering a side door. The room they came into was dark, but distant voices could be heard, ones that Naruto recognized. It was enough to calm him down slightly, but he was still slightly on edge. Sakura wouldn't put him in harm's way is what he told himself. As they entered a more well-lit room, a small and shocked voice whispered, "Naruto-kun." While almost everyone else had been talking, they had either heard Hinata or actually seen Naruto themselves. Most of the people looked shocked to see him. A small amount of the tension faded when Choji exclaimed, "Naruto, good to see you." Along with him was the rest of the Rookie 9 minus Sasuke Tenten, Neji Kakashi, Jiraiya, Asuma, Kurenai, Guy, and Anko. The adults had been bent over a table inspecting something while the younger people were either scattered around the room or joining in with whatever their elders were looking at. Jiraiya motioned at Tsunade and chuckled before saying, "I would hug you, but the last time I tried that you knocked me through the nearest wall." Tsunade rolled her eyes before responding with, "That's because you tried to cop a feel, you dumbass." She hadn't seen the man in years, and there were new revelations she had to talk to him about, but where they currently were was not the best place to do so, especially if things got out of hand. The white-haired man was able to sense Tsunade's anger and chose to keep the conversation light for the time being, since Naruto still hadn't said anything yet, which wasn't exactly characteristic of him. "What can I say, Tsunade, you know I've always had a certain feelings for you." He added the last bit with a wiggling of his eyebrows. Tsunade couldn't help but think that she really should have drank some of her sake now, it definitely would have come in handy. She sighed inwardly, slightly regretting the decision of momentary sobriety. Before anyone had the opportunity to say something else, Naruto muttered, for the second time that night, "Did I fail?" While everyone had quieted down since he showed up, it was now silent, not even a single cricket could be heard. He tried to find answers from those that he considered his friends, but they all avoided his gaze. Looking at the Jonin only gave him a similar answer. They didn't look elsewhere, but their expressions were unreadable. That was a sign in itself. Jiraiya put a hand on Naruto's shoulder and motioned for him to follow. "Come on, kid, we have a lot to discuss." The man noticed Tsunade trailing behind them as he led Naruto into a smaller room to allow for better privacy. It was pretty plain, nothing was on the walls, and all that occupied the room was a few sleeping bags. Seeing them only made Naruto that much more curious about what was going on. Why would they be needed? Everyone he saw has a home and a family. Naruto was suddenly becoming impatient with his questions being left unanswered. "What happened?" he asked for the final time. His teeth were clenched together and his fists balled up at separate sides of his body. Sensing the boy's impatience, Jiraiya decided it would be best not to detour and got straight to the point. As I told you, you would have a month to convince Tsunade to return, which you did. However, Danzo convinced the council that enough time had passed and that you had failed. He called a meeting with the elders and clan leaders to elect a new Hokage and nominated himself. While there were people that disagreed with him, no one else stood up, and it was agreed that he was to become the sixth. He waited for the new information to soak in before continuing. One of my spies in the Anbu has informed me that she caught Danzo speaking to a person in a black cloak with red clouds on it. Tsunade had not yet seen the symbol, and had heard little of the organization. Naruto on the other hand knew enough to be aware that they meant no good, especially for him. Akatsuki? He questioned, Danzo communicating with them. That was one surefire way to spell trouble. Jiraiya nodded. It was revealed that he made a deal with them. Konoha will remain untouched as long as they hand over the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. I believe there are more to their agenda than what they informed Danzo. My spy however heard nothing else on the subject. They're here, this Akatsuki? Tsunade asked for clarification. While she wasn't entirely sure who they were, she knew enough to make assumption on them. How the village would allow this was beyond her. Jiraiya nodded and opened his mouth to say something but was interrupted by Naruto, who seemed to have regained his voice. Wait, where's Sasuke and bushy brows? Hearing about Akatsuki had reminded the blonde of Itachi, which in turn also reminded him about one of the reasons he had originally brought Tsunade back to Konoha in the first place. Tsunade noticed a moment of hesitation before Jiraiya replied. Rock Lee is in the building, he's woken up but has difficulty getting around. The medical team at the hospital have done all they can do. Guy refused to leave without him. Leave him? Naruto probed, not knowing what reason anyone else would have to leave the village. The man nodded. You're not alone in this, kid. There are people that don't agree with Danzo and believe he is not the rightful Hokage. Fear is a powerful weapon, there are many that are too scared to speak out. Everyone here will do everything in their power to protect you. A certain warmth spread throughout Naruto's chest, it was a foreign feeling to him. He however realized one of his questions was left unanswered and the feeling dissipated after a second. What about Sasuke? Maybe we should talk about that one later. Naruto ground his foot into the floor and with a strong, even voice replied with a quick, no. Jiraiya sighed and decided getting it over with would probably be best after all. The boy was too thick-headed to drop the matter. 5 of Orochimaru's men came back to the village in disguise. A healer was one of them. She was able to help the Uchiha recover enough for them to what we guess set up some type of proposition. Their true identities cannot be confirmed, and since no one was around it cannot be told was transpired, but he left. What? How do you know that he wasn't just kidnapped? Naruto yelled. We had to go after them. Jiraiya shook his head. Getting you to safety is our top priority right now, But, he tried to argue before Tsunade butted in. For once the man is right. If Orochimaru really took Sasuke then there is a reason. He would not go through the trouble of sending a team to capture the boy if he was just going to be killed immediately after. Tsunade left out the idea she had for as to why Orochimaru took Sasuke, one that she was sure Jiraiya must have known as well. But, well, that means he could still be in danger. Both of the adults sighed tiredly. Tsunade's coming out as more annoyed than Jiraiya's. She didn't know how else to explain the situation without going too much into detail. If her hunch was correct, then Naruto would only be that much more adamant about going after Sasuke. She didn't know how strong the Akatsuki members were, but putting Jiraiya on edge wasn't an easy feat to accomplish, so Tsunade could only imagine the power the group held in their grasp. Look, Naru. The boy shook his head stubbornly. No, I'm not going to just abandon Sasuke. As Naruto turned to leave, Tsunade trailed behind him and shouted, he chose to leave. Jiraiya followed after the two just in time to see Naruto hurdle the planning table and Tsunade make a quick motion towards her apprentice. This resulted in Shizune shooting one of her senbon into Naruto's neck. The boy was able to remain on his feet by sheer determination, but after a few seconds it wasn't enough and he crumpled to the floor, only to be caught by Kakashi, who had been ready the moment he saw Shizune grasp the senbon. Several of the younger shinobi either gasped, called after Naruto, or looked on with wide eyes. Not feeling the need to explain herself, Tsunade stepped towards the table and took in the map that was laying atop it. Said map held all of the village's escape routes, ones she had already memorized. What is your plan? She waited a few seconds before realizing one hadn't been come up with yet. After a moment of consideration she added, "Are our whereabouts known?" Everyone shook their heads and Tsunade nodded in thought. Kurenai was the next to speak up. "I cast a genjutsu around the area that would cause anyone who came near to forget their purpose and return to where they came from. I don't know how much longer I will be able to keep it up though." Tsunade looked at the woman garbed in a red, black, and white outfit. Kurenai did look fatigued now that the Sannin was truly taking in her appearance. "How many of you have either a lightning or earth chakra nature?" None of the younger people knew the answer, but all of the Jonin, plus Jiraiya, did. Asuma, Anko, and Kurenai all said neither. Guy said lightning, and Jiraiya and Kakashi said both. Tsunade herself could manipulate each of them as well. While she was mentally formulating a plan, there was one more important thing that needed to be discussed. "We cannot all leave." It was more of a thought than anything else at this point. "Shizune." "Yes," came the immediate response from her pupil. Tsunade very carefully thought about her next move. She was cautious, but it was the best plan she could formulate. "You know me better than anyone else." Jiraiya, clearing his throat, interrupted her, but he quieted after a glare and held his hands up in surrender. "As I was saying, I want you to transform into a clone of me, stay in Konoha, and dig up all you can on Danzo and Akatsuki's plan. Behave as if you are trying to change the council's mind and become Hokage." "Jiraiya, who here could best behave like you?" Before the man even had the chance to answer, everyone's index fingers pointed at Kakashi, who had to look up from reading one of his Icha novels, which served to reiterate everyone's point. "Do you, Kakashi, know Jiraiya well enough to be able to perfectly imitate him?" "Yes." He seemed to ponder something before adding, "Lady Hokage." Tsunade's mouth opened slightly. She was at a loss of what to say. She'd come here with the faint possibility of becoming Hokage, but being called it was something else entirely. The title held an enormous weight. Kakashi stepped forward while slipping his book into his pocket and knelt down in front of the legendary ninja. "You are the rightful Hokage, and I am ready to defend you and the greatness you can bring back to Konoha." Everyone else in the room, that was still conscious, followed suit and repeated Kakashi's monologue. "Stand, all of you," Tsunade said after a moment and waited for all of them to do so before continuing her speech. "Greatness will take more than just me. It will take every single one of you. I will not lie and say that I know what we're up against, but I will try my damnedest to restore Konoha to its former glory, because I do not recognize the one I have just stepped foot in." Shino was the first of the genin to speak up, surprisingly enough. "I will stay as well, in case the supporters here need a tracker to find their way back to you, Lady Hokage." Kurenai then added, "He is a part of my team, I will stay as well." Asuma was the last to speak, but he had to think of a good enough excuse other than wanting to remain near Kurenai. "My father was the third, and I have further connections with the fire daimyo. I can try to pull some strings." Tsunade nodded. While she had several genin with her, she still had hope as long as they showed the same qualities as Naruto, when he wasn't being a pain in the ass, that is. If they all turned out to behave the exact same way as him, Tsunade would need a greater amount of sake. Plus, she still had Jiraiya, who, while he was a pervert, he was also a capable ninja. She was not as familiar with Might Guy and Anko, but she'd heard promising things from when they were younger, and the two couldn't have gotten worse. Anko particularly could come in handy when it came time to retrieve the Uchiha. What Tsunade was about to say was known only to her and the Senju members of previous times. "I know a place we can go where no one will be able to find us. This is to remain confidential, especially to those that are staying in the village for the time being. As all of you should know, the Senju clan is one of the two founders of Konoha, Uchiha being the second. I am unsure as to whether or not the Uchiha did something similar, but the Senju cast a jutsu of sorts that made their previous compounds impossible to find for anyone without the proper blood. My grandfather told tales of this. As long as a Senju is alive, the jutsu will stay intact." "What exactly does this jutsu do?" Anko asked dubiously. She didn't mean for it to come out in such a manner, but a jutsu powerful enough to do that and last that long. It seemed utterly impossible. Tsunade was annoyed with Anko's tone but also understood her hesitation, knowing the woman had not been born during the reign of the Senju. "Have you ever been met with a part of the forest that had trees so thick you had no choice but to go around them? Trees that could not be cut by any blade? Trees that towered over the others and seemed impossible to climb?" The realization of the truth behind those trees was enough to make Anko's mouth drop, along with several sets of eyes to widen. With no one else interrupting her, Tsunade resumed what she was saying. For those of you that can use the lightning nature, I want you to force as much of it into the ground as possible. To clarify for those who were not yet aware of how the different chakra natures worked, the slug princess added, lightning trumps earth, so it will make the next step easier. Anyone that uses the earth nature, I want you to build a tunnel with what the lightning users softened. However, make sure there are no explosions, it would draw too much attention. Now, lightning users stand by me. Everyone else, stay on your feet, don't touch anything. Kakashi handed Naruto off to Choji and Shikamaru, who each held him up by separate shoulders. After Akamaru, who was by no means no longer a small puppy, jumped in Kiba's arms, and Shizune picked up Tonton, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Tsunade, and Guy all knelt down and put a single hand on the ground. The four summoned lightning and directed it into the ground, but it was still enough to make the room flicker between glowing shades of blue and white. That's enough, now the earth users, Tsunade signaled. Guy stepped back with sweat dripping down his brow. He rarely ever used anything other than taijutsu since it was his specialty, and he was definitely out of practice. The remaining three took a breath while rearranging themselves into a triangular formation. The ground started to vibrate and then pieces of the earth suddenly began falling away between the trio. This step took a longer amount of time since it was a bigger job, but the three still managed to accomplish it nonetheless. Once the tunnel was made, the three all fell back, each equally exhausted from the exertion. The strain, however, was not enough to keep any of the three down for long, and after a moment they all stood back up on relatively steady feet. After a quick second to catch her breath, Tsunade called out, "Shizune, Kakashi." They both responded by taking their places next to each other in front of the rightful Hokage. "Perform the transformation jutsu." "Yes," they both replied. After Shizune put Tonton on the ground, they both weaved through the hand signs perfectly in sync. Transformation jutsu. Smoke surrounded the pair, and when it dissipated, all that was left were perfect imitations of Itusanin. Jiraiya laughed and said, "He looking good, Kakashi, or should I say Jiraiya?" He nudged Kakashi in the ribs with his elbow before walking around the man and inspecting him more closely. Tsunade did the same, but quicker and less humorously than her former teammate. Tsunade gave a noise of approval. They both looked flawless. "Now, one last thing, Shizune. If any of you find yourselves in trouble or discover something important, send Katsuyu. Drop the transformation only when you are 100% certain that you are alone. If you need to prove your identity, then use the password, restoration." No one who opposed them would be able to think of that word. It was the best thing possible for their situation. A small smile pulled at the corner of Tsunade's lips. Not just her, but all of them would bring restoration to the village hidden in the leaves. Tsunade chuckled inwardly. She'd finally found someone that understood her way of speaking. The tunnel itself had been narrow, which meant everyone had to travel in a single file line. The taller members of the group had to bend over in an effort to not rub their head across the top, which had small pieces of dirt breaking away enough anyways. An earthy musk permeated the air, which was not a surprise based off of where they were. The exit had been just outside of the wall, which, while it was not ideal, it was the best the earth nature users could work with given their lack of preparation. After everyone had made their way out of it, the tunnel was collapsed by its very creators. While it wasn't wise to continue on without a plan, it would have also been a poor idea to remain close to Konoha. In an effort to save time, Tsunade signaled for Anko and Guy to come to her while she directed the genin, the ones that didn't know where the massive trees were held, in the proper direction. "Because of the size of our assemblage, I need one of you to take the lead and the other backing up the rear. I will be in the middle with Lee and Naruto since they are unwell at the moment. I have a remedy for Naruto to wake him when we are far enough from the village for it to be safe to do so." Guy ended up as the lead, since he suggested bringing Neji up front with him to see what everyone else could not. Anko had no qualms with being in the back. It gave her the perfect opportunity to see everyone ahead and act quickly if need be. And while she didn't say it, the Kunoichi believed for anyone to be able to sneak up on her they would need luck, a lot of luck. Naruto was settled onto Akamaru's back so no one would have to carry him. Morning was quick to come around. Once it did, Tsunade finally deemed it safe enough to awaken Naruto, which also provided the chance for everyone else to take a break from the trek. Lord Hokage, a masked shinobi, said as a respectful way to announce his presence. Danzo had been in his office all day. He had previously been looking outside of the window that offered an extensive view of the village. Minutes before the man had concluded his latest meeting with Akatsuki, Danzo could not stand the member that the group always sent to him. His name was Toby, and a combination of his goofy voice and needless antics drove Danzo crazy. Not knowing the face behind the mask also bothered him, but not as much as the other things. "What is it?" Danzo asked. His back was straight while he leaned against his cane, which didn't do much to make him appear less imposing. The Anbu member, who had been kneeling on one knee, stood and replied with, "I spotted the nine-tailed Jinchuriki entering the village." Tsunade and a woman reported to be her apprentice accompanied him. How much time has passed? During the meeting with all of the Anbu, Danzo ordered them to report any sightings of the Jinchuriki so he could decide on an appropriate way to proceed. The reply was immediate. No more than 5 minutes. The shinobi's figure stood still, waiting for an order of what needed to be done. Danzo nodded. He returned to staring at Konoha. The hand that was not cloaked supported Danzo's frame as he leaned against the window. Immediately seizing Naruto and his traveling companions would be unwise because, since they hadn't been brought to him yet, they must be being hidden. Danzo had noticed several of the village's ninjas began falling off of the radar, most of them being genin, but there were a few jonin as well. "Leave, find their trail, figure out where they have gone." "Yes, Lord Hokage." He turned to leave, but Danzo regained his attention. "Fu." Danzo only waited for the root member to turn around before continuing. "If they look as if they are going to leave the village, then find Torun and pursue them together. Bring back the Jinchuriki, that is your mission." Danzo waited in his office for a few silent moments after his subordinate left. A commotion outside brought his attention to the door just in time to see a familiar blonde kunoichi slam it open. "I hear there's been a bit of confusion with who Hokage is," Tsunade said, or so the man thought she was. The adults spoke separately from the genin. The main things that were discussed having to do with the next steps that were to be taken. Afterwards, Tsunade asked for everyone's names, or rather the ones that she was not already aware of. She found Tenten's starstruck attitude to be quite entertaining and gave the brown-haired kunoichi a pat on the shoulder before continuing on. The introductions were done while everyone was waiting for Naruto to awaken. Tsunade had already administered the remedy, but the effect was not an immediate one, so she decided to kill time. She had to learn the younger people's names at some point anyway. A loud groan redirected Tsunade's attention to Naruto, who was finally starting to wake up. He was laying down under the shade of a tree. The area was relatively open, but the forest could still be seen not too far away. Naruto squinted his eyes and ran a hand through his disheveled blonde hair. He sat up dazedly, trying to figure out where he was. Was it all a dream? Had they not yet reached Konoha? He turned to the side just in time to see Tsunade headed towards him. Behind her was everyone he had reunited with when the night before. It took no longer than 2 seconds for the events to come back to him. "You drugged me," he yelled with an accusatory finger pointed at the blonde woman. All eyes were now watching him as Naruto stood up with a pout. Tsunade crossed her arms. "I didn't drug you, brat." Technically she didn't, Shizune did, but she had ordered for it to happen. Saying that would only rile him up, as would specifying that he was poisoned not drugged, so Tsunade refrained from doing so and filled the boy in on what he missed. Naruto soaked in everything he was told. One thing unsettled him more than anything else. What about Sasuke? Tsunade rubbed the sides of her temple as she held back a sigh. "You want everyone here to remain safe, correct? You want them protected?" Tsunade didn't wait for a response, having already known Naruto's answer. "We must continue on to the Senju compounds then. Once we're there, then we can work on finding a lead as to where Orochimaru is keeping Sasuke." "Fine," Naruto replied stubbornly. He had to admit that the woman had a point about keeping those around him safe. Heading in an aimless direction would only put them all in danger at some point. He stored the subject away for a later time, but it never ventured far from his thoughts. A familiar voice brought the smile back to Naruto's face. "Naruto, my youthful friend, we must spare once I get out of these bandages." Lee used his crunch to point at his leg. Naruto walked towards him with a grin. "Anytime anywhere," bushy brows. The other genin said their hellos to him as well. He was grateful to be surrounded by people that didn't hate him, but something bugged him. Why would you all leave your families? Naruto probed. He knew what it was like to live without one. He didn't want any of his friends, or rather acquaintances, to feel that same turmoil. Shikamaru was the first to respond. Years ago I asked my father something along the lines of whether or not I was allowed to play with you. He said it was a choice that only I could decide the answer to. He took a breath before continuing, as if speaking really took up that much energy. While it will most likely be troublesome, I left because I was given the same answer when I inquired as to what I should do in relation to you and Danzo. Ino nodded along with Shikamaru's words. When we were younger, as bad as it sounds, I didn't talk to you because everyone always pulled away when you were near. The blonde knew she couldn't change the past but did regret how she behaved. I thought you were just some annoying kid that played stupid pranks, but then we went on that mission to the land of noodles and I got to know you. Ino left out the part about being partially correct. Naruto was obnoxious at times. You're a good guy, I don't agree with Danzo wants to do. Yeah, Choji added while munching on a bag of chips. Ino, Shikamaru, and we talked to our fathers. They're all clan leaders and have an obligation to the well-being of our clans. We have been given the freedom to do what we think is right, and this is that. Several of the others nodded in agreement to the Ino-Shika-Cho trio's words. The only ones that didn't were Neji and Hinata, and neither of them really wanted to go into what went down unless asked. It'd most likely only cause Naruto to feel bad. You have more friends than you think, Naruto-kun, Sakura said with an expression that could only prove how genuine her words were. She had a small smile as she pulled Naruto in for a hug but was surprised when he gently pushed her back. Naruto shook his head. He wasn't about to have anyone follow him into uncertainty without them having the knowledge of what he had hidden inside. Listen guys, I'm not who you think I am. He got cut off by Ino. Wait, the kunoichi was squinting into the distance. She thought she could sense chakra other than that of those who were around her. Akamaru sniffed the air and began to growl. What's wrong, Akamaru? Kiba asked his faithful companion. Neji and Hinata both said, Byakugan, which followed with the two activating their Kekai Genkais. Their eyes bulged as they searched in the same area Ino had found suspicion in. It was at this point that Tsunade noticed the silence that had emanated from the genin. They were looking off into the distance and Akamaru was starting to bark. While they had covered their tracks decently, the woman also knew that Konoha ninjas were trained to be the best. They were bound to be followed at some point, she just didn't think they'd be found so soon. She looked at Jiraiya and they both seemed to get the same idea and nodded at each other. Transformation jutsu, they both called out. Tsunade turned into Shizune while Jiraiya did the same except with Kakashi. The hope was that whoever trailed their group was not a Hyuga, if so then the jutsu would be rendered useless since their sensing abilities allow the user to see a person as a whole and not just a chakra signature. Tsunade was able to figure out just what kind of person was tracking them when Naruto began walking towards the trees with a steely expression that did not fit his personality. Fucking Yamanakas, Tsunade thought to herself before running forward. His pace quickened along with hers. A couple of Naruto's friends called after him. Shadow Possession Jutsu. Mind Transfer Jutsu. Shikamaru and Ino had their combo down to a T, having performed it countless times since their graduation from the academy. The next set events all happened within a few seconds. Ino was inside of Naruto's mind, but what she did not expect was for someone else to be there as well. Whoever followed them knew her jutsu as well, and she didn't know what would happen if two people invaded the same mind at the same time. Everything went black as she was blown back into her physical body with such force that she was actually sent her flying backwards. She was caught by Tsunade who had just then reached them, who carefully checked for a pulse. When the medical ninja found one, she gently laid Ino in the grass. Guy and Anko rushed into the tree line, each taking separate directions in hopes of flanking the enemy. The sky got dark, as if an eclipse was about to occur, but that wasn't possible since one wasn't due anytime soon. Hinata recognized what was happening before anyone else, since one of her teammates commonly used the same tactic when they were together on missions. Bugs swarmed above everyone's heads, so much that almost no light could be seen. They shot down towards Naruto, who was once again incapacitated, this time due to the mind transfer jutsu. Hinata performed the 8 trigrams palms revolving heaven jutsu in an effort to protect the blonde boy. A protective dome formed around the two as it was done. Seeing that the amount of insects had not dwindled, Jiraiya set forth to make his own attack. The first thing that came to mind was using toad oil and fire, but that would bow his cover since it was one of the things Kakashi could not do, and for the time being he was restricted to only the jutsu that was in the copy ninja's book. Fire release, Great Fireball Jutsu. Flames billowed from Jiraiya's mouth before turning into a large ball that was larger than his entire body. He forced it forwards, careful to avoid Hinata and Naruto. Roasted bugs fell to the grass, and those that had been outside of the attack's radius flew back into the forest. Kiba ran to follow the bugs that were returning to their master's origin. "Come on Akamaru, let's go." The dog barked in response and darted forwards so he could catch up with his favorite human. Neji and Tenten followed, both receiving approving nods from Tsunade before doing so. Lee also tried to follow his teammates but a certain pink-haired ninja standing in his way stopped him from doing so. "You can't, Lee, Sakura tried to argue before being interrupted. "No, I can fight. I can," Lee pleaded, but it was to no avail. "She's right, you're in no condition to be doing much of anything, let alone fighting. Allowing you to complete this trek alone is risky enough." Tsunade added to reiterate Sakura's point. She hadn't even gotten the moment to properly examine the boy, but from what she could tell his injuries were quite extensive. Ino was finally beginning to regain consciousness. She sat up slowly so that she wouldn't become lightheaded. Looking to her side she saw that the only people remaining were Tsunade, Jiraiya, Shikamaru, Choji, Sakura, Lee, Hinata, and a still passed out Naruto. She was able to put two and two together and guess where everyone else had gone. "Okay, here's the plan. Choji, Hinata, and Jiraiya, I want you three to take up any attacks that can be prevented before the enemy gets too close. Sakura and Shikamaru, I want you two to aid them with more long-distance attacks, and if anyone gets past them then provide immediate backup." Tsunade then turned her focus to the newly conscious addition to the group. "Ino, track the enemy and tell us if they get too close. Finally, I will serve as the final line of defense while making sure Naruto didn't receive any serious injuries from the multiple mind transfer jutsus. Any questions?" Everyone shook their heads and took up their respected positions. Jiraiya remained by Tsunade for a second longer to say, "See, you're great at being Hokage, Tsunade. Or should I say Shizune?" He was about to put a hand on Tsunade's shoulder but stopped the movement when he was met with a raised eyebrow. Once Jiraiya turned around, a small smile took its place on Tsunade's lips. While the man's words were said in a humorous way, they were also genuine and said without falter. She still wasn't sure if she was up to it, but people believed in her and that's all she needed for a boost of confidence. Tsunade got to work on examining Naruto. The Yamanaka jutsu did not seem to affect him physically, which was a huge plus, but the boy still should have woken up by now. Medical jutsu could not evaluate his mental state, so the legendary ninja's only option was to wait and see how he acted when he woke up. The blonde was clueless enough at times. Tsunade didn't want or need him to get any worse in that department. "They're coming back. Gai-sensei and Anko-sensei both have a hostage," Ino informed the group. Something didn't seem right about their chakra signatures though, they were both small. Chakra was only ever that way when it was almost completely exhausted or. The two Jonin and the rest of the genin had just emerged from the tree line when Ino yelled, "They're clones." The moment it was said, one of the clones burst into a swarm of bugs and the other poofed away, leaving behind white smoke in its wake. Everyone was alert now. The clones were clearly a distraction. Everyone surrounded Naruto while facing outwards in a circular formation. Akamaru walked around everyone while sniffing at the ground. Suddenly the dog focused on a specific spot and began barking loudly. "You find something, Akamaru?" Kiba asked. He expected a final bark as a confirmation from his loyal companion, as he usually received, but got nothing. He turned to look at the animal and found that Akamaru was as still as a statue, nose still pointed at the ground. His eyes had no movement whatsoever. "Akamaru, you okay?" The dog looked up and started to growl. He lunged at the person who was closest to him with bared teeth, and that person just so happened to be Jiraiya. The man was easily able to dodge the attack, but made the crucial mistake of leaving an opening. Said mistake, however, was corrected by Anko, who turned her arm into snakes that shot forth and wrapped around the dog. While she was strong, so was Akamaru, and clearly whoever was controlling him as well. Anko struggled to force the dog outside of their circle without physically harming him. Her jaw was clenched tight and a bead of sweat rolled down her forehead. When it was clear that she was about to win the battle of will, Akamaru suddenly went limp and sagged to the ground. Kiba kneeled down to check for a pulse. He couldn't imagine life without Akamaru, and knew he'd go into a blind rage if the dog died. The brown-haired boy was relieved when he felt a heartbeat inside in relief. Kiba then stood back up and was more than ready to get revenge on whoever possessed Akamaru. Ino, how many times can the mind transfer jutsu be performed in a period of time? Tsunade implored, desperate to find out before someone else's mind was invaded and more trouble was caused. Ino shook her head. The answer had a lot of factors that could affect it. It depends on the person. My father can do it multiple times in a short amount of time and can even control dozens of people at once. She tried to search for the person's chakra signature to see just how much they had left, but they were hidden well this time. Before she could elaborate any further, something landed on her elbow and caused her to look back. Everyone turned around when Ino was knocked out of the formation. They were met with an Anbu masked ninja covered in black garb head to toe, with the exception of his hands. Tsunade tried to figure out how he got past all of them when she noticed his purple hands. That's when she noticed Akamaru must have been barking at bugs. It was the perfect thing to employ to slip past them. Don't let him touch you, Tsunade ordered. Ino was already grunting in pain. The kunoichi didn't want anyone else to share what the girl was feeling. There was no way for the medical ninja to safely reach Ino, and if what Tsunade was told about the Rinkaichu was correct, then there was little she could do to help. Torun was an amazing ninja, but he was minimal compared to legendary, and he was fighting too with that honorable rank. Tsunade waited for the perfect moment to attack at full force. Jiraiya had just dodged a blow that left the Bugmaster open, so she took the opportunity from behind. The man didn't fly far before he turned into another swarm of bugs. Tsunade growled. She was becoming tired of the clones. Everyone was getting tired of them, as a matter of fact. Don't have the balls to face us head on? Anko shouted angrily. She didn't know much about the specific Anbu members, so she wasn't sure if the plan would work or not, but she wanted to egg at least one of them on enough to get the real one to come out. It wasn't all an act though, she really was fed up. Come on now, I thought Anbu taught its members to not be cowards. Anko stepped out of the circle with her arms wide open. Just you two and me, or are the both of you still too wimpish? Her ear twitched as she heard a sound. She did not recognize the figure of the man running at her. All she knew was that he was a Yamanaka. As Anko fought Fu, who was primarily using a tanto, Torun revealed himself as well. His aim was to perform a takedown on the distracted Anko, but Jiraiya quickly caught on and countered the move. I am your opponent, Jiraiya declared with a stern expression. Shikamaru squatted as he began to formulate a plan, while Choji moved away from the group and towards Ino so she could be protected as well. At the same time, Naruto began to wake up. He squeezed his eyes together tightly. The blonde didn't know what caused him to pass out, but whatever it was resulted in him having a raging headache. When Naruto opened his eyes, his vision was foggy, so he blinked a couple of times to clear it up. Before he could ask what happened, the clash of battling registered in his ears and he jumped up. Naruto looked around. He was surrounded by almost everyone he left Konoha with. What he couldn't figure out was where Shizune and Kakashi came from. The next thing that drew his attention was Ino reeling around in pain on the ground. Part of her face had a purple-looking splotch on it. The sight ignited a certain spark deep within the boy's belly. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Naruto yelled furiously as he surged towards the fighting. He was too fast for Tsunade to catch, who he ran right past. The plan Shikamaru had just come up with was now void and useless. Everything was turning into a chaotic mess. To make matters worse, why were his eyes red? Tenten asked. She was the other person that was past when Naruto ran by, and while he was fast, she was able to notice the distinctive blue hue gone from the normally joyful eyes. Sakura had seen the color change happen on a few missions, but wasn't sure what caused it. She never really had the chance to ask. The girl, however, did not expect to see what happened next. Naruto was furious. Ino got hurt because of him, because of what was inside him, because of whoever was in front of him. He had 4 clones with him and together they all launched an attack. 3 of the clones ran ahead while Naruto held one back. Jiraiya turned his head the second he heard a familiar voice yell, "Rasengan." He saw the blue orb pass his face. Naruto's body followed soon after, just before it slammed into the Torun's stomach. Shikamaru used his shadow possession jutsu to prevent the Anbu member from being able to cause more harm to anyone else. Naruto attempted to slam a fist down on the man, but Shikamaru was able to move him to the side just in time. "We need him so that he can reverse what he did to Ino," Shikamaru yelled in an attempt to convince Naruto to leave the already subdued man alone. His words, however, seemed to have the opposite effect. Naruto didn't know which of the people had hurt Ino, but now he did, and the knowledge only made him that much more furious. The hate he felt towards the Anbu member continued to steadily increase. He readied his fist, but just before he could throw the punch, a different hand caught his wrist and stopped him from doing so. While Tsunade was stopping Naruto, Jiraiya ran towards Anko to help with the other Anbu shinobi. Tsunade was strong, but the state Naruto was in was difficult even for her to handle. The legendary ninja struggled to keep his arm from completing its attack. Red chakra began to envelop the Jinchuriki's body. It was something Tsunade had never seen before. A different kind of illumination also caught her attention. Tsunade glanced down for a second. Her necklace was glowing a light shade of green. It was peaceful compared to the red in Naruto's eyes. Whatever was going on with the boy, Tsunade knew at least part of it had to be influenced by the nine-tailed fox. "Naruto," the fox called out to him. "Let me out and I will take care of these people." Naruto shook his head. His canines grew along with his anger. Unbeknownst to him, a tail grew out of the cloak that was now completely covering him. "Come now, boy, use my power. Become stronger," the fox tried to persuade. Tsunade could see the inner battle Naruto was having with himself and the nine tails. Her grandmother never seemed to have this problem, she never saw it happen at least. The red chakra was starting to cause her hand to blister, but removing the extremity would only allow for Naruto to possibly kill the man. As Naruto further transformed into an image of the Kyuubi, Tsunade's necklace also began to shine brighter. An idea popped up in the blonde's head. She took off her necklace, then slipped it over Naruto's neck. Naruto heard the fox growl before it ordered, "Rip that thing off. It is a hindrance to my powers." Naruto reached up and grabbed the necklace, but before he could pull it, a different voice called to him. "Naruto," Tsunade began, "don't listen to whatever the Kyuubi is telling you." She noticed her words seemed to be having some effect, seeing as the transformation had at least been halted. "Don't let the nine tails control you. You're the Jinchuriki, you control it." "No one controls me. Without me you would have died 7 times already." Almost all of the remaining genin rushed to either help Jiraiya and Anko or check up on Ino. Sakura stopped next to Tsunade and Naruto. "Tsunade-sama, your hands," the pink-haired girl exclaimed. Naruto opened his eyes while muting the fox. Sakura and Tsunade stood in front of him. When he noticed the elder of the two struggling against him, he immediately relaxed. The red chakra slowly seemed to seep back into Naruto's skin. He got a glimpse of Tsunade's hand before she was able to hide it behind her back, and his eyes widened in response. "Did I do that to you?" Naruto gulped, terrified of a possible affirmation to the response. He wished he could better suppress the nine tails, but it was no easy feat. There was so much that Naruto still did not know about the beast. The Kyuubi was shrouded in mystery and hate. Anytime Naruto felt intense hate towards someone, the nine tails had a way of bringing himself out. It felt impossible to control. "The chakra did it to me, not you." Tsunade was careful not to reveal anything about said chakra since Sakura did not yet know about Naruto being the Jinchuriki. It was only a minor injury, the medical ninja could expertly heal it anyways. Naruto didn't know if the words made him feel any better. He let the fox get out of control. If that didn't happen, then the red chakra wouldn't have come up in the first place. As far as he was concerned, it was still his fault. Naruto looked to the side when he finally heard the fight quiet down. Jiraiya had the other Anbu member thrown over his shoulder and was walking towards them. Jiraiya had seen the nine-tail cloak forming on Naruto, but when it happened his hands were full. By the time it had gone away, Tsunade and Sakura had already seemed to take care of the problem. That was what Jiraiya thought until he saw the solemn expression on Naruto's face. He made a mental note to ask the boy about it later. "Shikamaru, How much longer can you keep the jutsu going? When Jiraiya looked at the boy, he wore a focused look, but beneath that was a veiled layer of fatigue. It had been a few minutes, but Shikamaru knew he'd performed the jutsu for a longer amount of time in the past. A few more minutes. The Nara could not come up with an exact estimate, so that was his best answer. Jiraiya nodded in response. His forms of gathering intel did not usually take long to complete. He walked over to the two Anbu members and took off their masks. Much to his surprise, the Yamanaka was dead. Purple veins seemed to be running up his neck and the man's lips were the same color. He made sure no one performed a killing blow. After a few moments of consideration, the sage realized that the former Anbu member must have taken something to kill himself, so that it would be impossible for him to reveal any secrets and/or plans. After searching the Abarame's pockets, Jiraiya found what must have been the source of his partner's death. He held it up for Tsunade to analyze, since she was more well-versed in anything to do with poison concoctions than he was. Tsunade examined the pill. The shell was clear, so she was able to see a dark powdery substance on the inside of it. It was indeed fatal to whoever took it, but at the same time the pill looked to be hastily put together. When Tsunade was still an active shinobi for Konoha, they didn't use such tactics. It must have been something new Danzo created for the Anbu members to use in the case of capture. Tsunade closed her hand, each finger coming down separately from the others, then crushed the pill which had been at the center of her palm. There would be no easy way out from this. Whoever the man was, he was going to pay somehow, someway. Jiraiya stood over Torun with his hands grasped behind his back. The posture painted a very imposing and intimidating image, but the Anbu member was taught from a young age to not fall victim to such tactics. You understand the position you're in, correct? Jiraiya inquired. When he received a silent response, the shinobi set his lips into a tight line. Silence will get you nowhere. But if you insist, then I at least ask you to do one thing. Help the girl. Think of it as a strategic move, if you will. Her father is Inochi Yamanaka, the head of their clan, and she is set to take his place. Do you really want to make an enemy of an entire clan? Torun looked at Jiraiya with an expressionless face. She abandoned the village on the counts of supporting someone she doesn't really know. I, on the other hand, have orders from the Hokage. He would easily pardon me for my crimes. This conversation is pointless. I will not survive to report back to the Hokage anyway. Jiraiya hummed as if he was actually in thought. It was a typical response that was not uncommon from those who were captured. Say you're right, and I don't allow you to return to the village. You could use your final breaths to take away pain and do some good for this world. In all honesty, Jiraiya did not want to kill the man. He had never murdered a Konoha ninja before and didn't ever want to have to do so. You could also be wrong. There is the possibility that I'll release you if you do as I say. Jiraiya could tell that the man was in a state of consideration, even if his facial expression hadn't changed in even the slightest way. Torun finally spoke. I will do it, but I require one thing in return. Jiraiya was skeptical, but he at least nodded, curious of what this so-called requirement would be. Torun still couldn't move his body, but he could control his eyes. The dark orbs looked straight at Naruto as he replied, he must tell everyone what they are fighting for. The boy must tell them all what he is hiding and what is within him. Naruto was already going to tell the group that he was the Jinchuriki. The nerves he now felt, however, was greater than before. It wasn't something he was doing 100% from his own free will. He had to do it to save a friend, and for that, he would do anything, even if it meant losing almost everyone close to him. He shamefully walked towards Ino and the people that were with her so they'd be able to hear as well. All of the genin stood in front of him with the exception of Ino and Hinata. The Hyuga sat with Ino's head in her lap so she would at least be slightly more comfortable while dealing with the pain. Ino wasn't being as vocal as when Torun first put the Rinkaichu on her body, but it was still clear that she was in an intense amount of pain. Shikamaru wasn't able to keep the jutsu going any longer and was forced to drop it. When he did, Anko and Guy flanked the root member on opposite sides so he wouldn't be able to escape. In an effort to intimidate the man, Anko hadn't returned her arm to its normal state, so it was still compromised of snakes. Jiraiya and Tsunade stood behind Naruto on opposite sides. Neither of them thought any of the teens would have negative reactions, but there was always a chance for the unlikely to happen. They made sure to keep a short amount of distance from Naruto so that he wouldn't feel suffocated. Naruto was basically in the middle of a deformed oval. He was thankful for the people that stood behind him, but he was able to pull little strength from them. The Jinchuriki anxiously balled up his fist while kneading his palm with his fingers. There had been few times when he felt as nervous as he currently was. Does whatever he was talking about have to do with that red chakra that was around you earlier? Sakura asked while looking back and forth between Naruto and the Anbu member. She couldn't figure out why the man would know something about Naruto that she didn't since she'd known the blonde since they were younger. She remembered that he was about to tell them all something before they were attacked. Is it the same thing you were going to tell us before we were attacked? Sakura added. All of the genin looked at her as she asked the questions, then turned their gazes back to Naruto. Naruto took a breath, closed his eyes, then nodded slowly. When I was born. The fourth Hokage. Naruto flinched slightly when he felt a hand on each of his shoulders. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya stood behind him and each of them gave a supportive nod when Naruto turned his head. It had taken the boy a while to figure it out, but he had eventually figured out the two were under a transformation jutsu. Even if the legendary ninjas didn't look like themselves, the general aura that was given off by the two was the same. When I was born, the Kyuubi was sealed inside of me. I am the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. Naruto managed to say it without further stuttering. He felt like he couldn't breathe. All of the people that were new to the revelation all had shocked expressions adorning their faces. Naruto froze completely when Sakura started to walk towards him. He couldn't quite read the expression on her face, and that only caused him to feel even more unsettled. Sakura stopped when she was a few short paces away from Naruto. Naruto closed his eyes, preparing himself to be hit but not wanted to see it from someone he actually cared about. No heavy blow was landed on him, but something did happen. It took a couple of seconds for it to register in Naruto's head that the touch he felt was not rough but gentle. He didn't realize he was holding his breath and immediately released it as he slumped further into Sakura's embrace. One by one the remaining genin followed suit and wrapped their arms around Naruto. Choji remained by Ino but never took his eyes off of the moving gesture. Ino, who had heard and acknowledged every word, did the same thing. Guy and Anko escorted Torun to Ino. The man kept his word and began moving towards the girl the second Naruto revealed that he was the Jinchuriki. Everyone turned around while remaining close to Naruto. He moved forwards so he could see exactly what the Anbu member was doing. He no longer sensed ill will from the man, but he was taking no chances. Torun made the process appear so simple. He placed a finger where they appeared to be sucked back into his body. When he pulled away, Ino's face returned to its usual clearness. She was relieved that the pain was finally gone. Never before had she felt something even close to that. The blonde looked at Naruto and held her arm out. When she only got an apprehensive stare in response, she rolled her eyes and said, "When a girl holds her arm out, you're supposed to help her up." Naruto reached out and easily pulled the girl up. Ino used the momentum to lean forward and give him a hug of her own. Choji stood and patted Naruto on the shoulder before moving to stand next to Shikamaru. Relief flooded every vein in Naruto's body. When he and Ino separated, they met eyes for a moment. Naruto examined her face to make sure that she indeed was no longer in harm's way. While he did not personally hurt her, he still felt bad for the pain Ino had to endure. He would have dealt with the brunt of the pain if the opportunity presented itself. He looked at everyone else. They were all supplying him with gentle smiles. Jiraiya gave him a double thumbs up and a wide grin. After the heartwarming moment passed, Tsunade looked at the Anbu member. Before she could decide what to do, the man very noticeably swallowed something. A second later he was on the ground. He didn't move. How did he take another pill? Anko questioned. She had made sure to watch him and was certain that the only time he moved was to help Ino. The man never intended to make it out of the situation. Tsunade guessed. He must have already had the pill under his tongue. Torun's actions caused Tsunade to question the entire incident. She wondered if the two Anbu had purposely been caught to begin with. It didn't seem strategic, but they could have underestimated who all they were going to be up against. All Tsunade was sure of was that everyone was safe, and that was more important than anything. Shizune and Kakashi had just gotten out of a meeting. For a while, the two dreaded the thought that it would last all day. Luckily that was not the case. One very important thing was found out, however. Danzo did not have as much power as he claimed. He was only an interim Hokage, but he had been nominated to become the fifth. Just when the two were about to exit the Hokage tower, someone bumped into Shizune. It was Kaharu, one of the council members. She was accompanied by Homura. The both of them shared similar bored-looking expressions. "My apologies, Tsunade-hime," the woman said while grabbing one of Shizune's hands. Shizune briefly slipped her hand in under the scarf around her waist while on the way to flick something off her arm. Since Tsunade was the sole inheritor of everything passed down from the Senju clan, the Senju compound was left for Shizune and Kakashi to rest in. Shizune felt strange having to impostor Tsunade, but it was necessary. What felt even more bizarre was stepping foot in an area no one had in over a decade. The only time she had ever been there was when Tsunade took her and Dan on a tour throughout it. The worst thing about having act like Jiraiya for Kakashi was that he couldn't read the Icha Icha books in public. He had never once seen the sage read one of his own books, but he did research for future novels more than enough. Kakashi made sure to do the same flirty advances when he passed a pretty person. Once they returned to where they were staying and were indoors, Shizune reached behind her scarf and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her and Kakashi both dropped their transformation jutsus as the medical ninja read over the neatly written words. "As you know, Danzo has created an alliance of sorts with Akatsuki. They say they want to get rid of all of the tailed beasts. We think they have a hidden agenda, however. When Danzo was told of this, he denied it. We think his judgment is clouded by hate. At the bottom of this paper are the signatures of everyone who supports your claim to Hokage. Get this paper to the daimyo." At the bottom of the note was several signatures from different clan heads: Yamanaka, Akamichi, Nara, Inuzuka, and Aburame. Along with them were the signatures of Homura and Kaharu. Shizune's eyes widened. She didn't think they would have such a high amount of supporters. The thing about Konoha was that not everyone had an established clan in the village. A lot of people came from various locations when the village was first formed. Kakashi, that one important clan, was not on the list. Hyuga, his own clan, also had no clan head in the city, so Hitaki also was not on the list. The Sarutobi clan was in a similar situation, but that was what Asuma was for. He would be able to personally speak to the daimyo. The copy ninja summoned 2 ninja dogs and respectfully ordered the first to take the document to the fire daimyo. The second was told to track and inform Tsunade of the latest revelations relating to what was going on. Torun and Fu had been leaned against a tree so that they could easily be found. The group considered burying the Anbu members themselves but decided against it. They had simply been following orders from their leader, and even if they weren't agreeable, the two deserved a proper funeral in Konoha. The trek continued on. Naruto opted to remain at the back of the line. He still felt a shred of guilt from everything that went down. The blonde ran through everything that occurred several times. Each time Naruto found something he wished he had done differently. Everyone noticed the quietness of the atmosphere with Naruto being in the back. Several people thought about going to talk to him but didn't know what to say, while others wanted to give him space. Tsunade wanted to, but her place was in the middle with Lee since he was still injured and the position remained the best for protecting the youthful boy. Jiraiya still needed to talk to Naruto but saw Ino heading him right when he was about to do so. The man chuckled while wondering if anything romantic was possible between the two genin. It would be an interesting pairing indeed. Tsunade looked back at him but Jiraiya pretended like he hadn't been doing anything other than searching the trees. "Looking at your feet isn't a good way to keep watch, you know?" Ino asked jokingly. She had always excelled when it came to sensing the feelings of others, and a lot of negative ones were coming from Naruto. Naruto looked up. Ino was walking beside him and he hadn't even noticed her coming. "Oh yeah, you're right," he replied. Ino frowned. Naruto's usual upbeat attitude was missing and it affected the atmosphere in general. She sighed before saying, "You know what happened back there isn't your fault, right?" The blonde shook his head. "You got hurt. Tsunade got hurt. Neither of those things would have happened if I wasn't there." Ino's response was immediate. "We are ninjas, it could happen at any time." She paused to think about the best words to use next. "I don't blame you, and I'm sure Tsunade-sama feels the same way, so don't blame yourself. I could have stayed in the village if I wanted to, but I chose otherwise. You are worth the few minutes of pain I had to deal with." Both Naruto and Ino blushed at her words. Ino's rosy cheeks were because she had not completely thought through what she was saying. Naruto's blush was from the fact that no one had ever said anything like that to him and he didn't know how to respond in any other way. Jiraiya looked back again just in time to see the exchange and chuckled again. "What do you keep laughing at?" Tsunade inquired. It was the second time she had heard the sage laugh in under a few minutes and was curious as to what he found so entertaining. "Oh, nothing," Jiraiya replied. Tsunade was slightly annoyed and rolled her eyes before turning back around. The journey was quiet for the most part, it was no longer awkward but kind of peaceful. Shikamaru and Choji would talk on occasion. No one could figure out how Choji had managed to bring enough food to constantly be snacking on something. Guy would also break the silence every once in a while to talk about youth. Lee would always join in on Guy's conversation. Ino decided to stay back with Naruto, who while was still quiet was in an obviously improved mood. "Hey, Naruto-kun?" Ino prompted. "Huh?" Naruto replied while turning to look at her. He noticed the curious look on her face and that only made him more curious as to what she had to ask. Ino didn't see much harm being able to come from the question, so she asked, "Are the whisker-looking marks on your cheeks from the Kyuubi?" Naruto hadn't ever really thought too much on the subject. Before he found out that he was the Jinchuriki, the blonde always thought they were just some weird type of birthmark. After the revelation came to light, he did wonder the same thing, however. "Yeah, I think so," Naruto replied. Ino hummed in thought. She turned around so that she was walking backwards in front of Naruto, then followed by placing her hands over each set of the whisker marks. "I'm trying to see what you'd look like without them," Ino said when Naruto supplied her with a confused expression. Her hands didn't completely match his tanner skin tone, but Ino was able to fill in the blank spaces. She couldn't see a big difference. Without them, something just seemed to be missing though. A shred of light illuminated Naruto's blue eyes and Ino became entranced in the color. A combination of that and not paying attention to where she was going caused Ino to trip over a tree root. Naruto quickly reached out to catch her but ended up overstepping and tripped on the same root. They both tumbled to the ground, but Naruto was quick enough to turn them around so that he wouldn't land on Ino. To make matters worse, everyone heard the thump the fall made and turned around to see what had happened. Because of his previous thoughts, Jiraiya immediately started to laugh at the sight. "I didn't take you for a bottom," was all the man got out before a punch sent him flying into the nearest tree. Tsunade's attack provided the perfect distraction for the two genin to regain their footing without anyone noticing. "I'm gonna just," Ino stuttered while pointing forwards. Nothing else came from her mouth. She just turned around and walked towards the front of the line, her blush getting more red the further she walked. Naruto awkwardly rubbed the back of his neck. He didn't even know how to reply, so he just remained quiet. "Smooth kid, real smooth," Anko said from behind him. The proximity combined with the surprise caused Naruto to jump. Luckily he did not yell from being startled. The boy had had enough unwanted attention for the time being. "Where did you even come from?" Naruto asked suspiciously. Anko nodded her head behind them. "Didn't want to give up my position as the tail end of this party. Looks like it was a good idea because you were clueless to my presence." Naruto's face turned into a pout and he glared at the woman. He however still felt unease around Anko after what happened during the Chunin exams, so he too decided to move further up the line, eventually settling near Tsunade. Anko simply laughed in response. Tsunade turned her head when she heard someone come up next to her. When she saw that it was only Naruto, she said, "You should watch your footing next time." There was the slightest hint of a smirk on her lips. Yeah, Naruto mumbled. He kicked at the dirt with his feet, the pout still hadn't left his face. More talk ensued after Naruto and Ino's little incident. Jiraiya hadn't said anything else since he didn't want to deal with the chance of getting punched again. After a while, Naruto's stomach grumbled loudly. He obviously hadn't had the opportunity to get any food while they were back in Konoha for two reasons. It was too late when they were still there and he had been rendered useless when they were leaving the village. The blonde cringed while holding onto his stomach. Tsunade, who heard the noise, took her bag off of her shoulder and handed it to Naruto. "I bought some food while we were still in that town from last night." Naruto quickly thanked her while eagerly taking the bag. "You're the best," he exclaimed after he pulled out an apple and a small bag of chips. Jiraiya smiled at the sight. He had been worried that the pair's equal bullheadedness would get in the way of them getting along. He had never been so glad to be wrong, but that's not to say that they wouldn't argue at some point, that was inevitable. As Naruto ate, his mood further returned to what was considered normal for him. More conversations started up as time passed by. Once evening came around, all the walking became tedious for Naruto, and several others at that, but he was the only one to say something about it. "Hey, how long is it gonna take us to get to this place anyway?" Naruto asked loudly. Tsunade glanced at him for a second before looking forwards again. If they kept on going at the speed they were currently at, they'd be able to make it there around midnight. She looked at Lee, who to his credit was going at a good pace for being on crutches. He showed no sign of fatigue, but he still shouldn't have been moving as much as he was. "Depends," was all Tsunade said. Naruto groaned. "That's barely an answer though." "Well, it's all you're going to get right now," Tsunade replied. Naruto was about to say something else, but commotion ahead alerted him of something ahead. Tsunade too looked to see what was happening. A group of people was running towards them. Everyone tensed up when they seemed to be running at them. The people further up in the line all readied their fighting stances. "Rune, the forest is haunted," one man from the group yelled. By the look on his face, he didn't seem to be playing. The other people that were with him looked equally terrified. "It took one of our traveling companions," another yelled. "Ghosts," a woman yelled. "Ghosts?" Naruto asked nervously while taking a step closer to Tsunade. Everyone had already run by, so no affirmation was given to him. The boy's face visually paled. As the group on Ninja continued forward, Anko asked, "Isn't this near where a lot of people have gone missing lately?" Everyone stopped and looked back at her. Some people looked at her with annoyed looks, thinking Anko was just trying to screw with them. Others either tried to hide their fear with indifferent expression or clearly showed it. "I shit you not, there have been reports from a place that's at least close to here," Anko added. "The third had a mission for me to check it out after the Chunin exams, but I was ordered otherwise after everything that happened." Anko's hands were held up in defense. She wasn't sure if she believed people were actually going missing, but enough was happening for the Leaf Village to be contracted to take care of it. A few more minutes passed by when Jiraiya decided it would be a good idea to do something stupid. "Hey Tsunade," he began with a mischievous tone. "Aren't you scared of ghosts?" Tsunade's deadly glare did not wipe the grin off of the sage's face. "Where would you get that idea?" She would admit nothing, especially around so many other people. Jiraiya hummed, pretending to be in thought. "Well, we were only teammates for years, plus you have goosebumps." Tsunade didn't know how Jiraiya knew she had goosebumps. Her arms were covered in her signature green haori. Her calves were still relatively open, but she didn't think he was looking there. Whatever the answer was, Tsunade didn't really care to find out. "I'm just cold," the legendary Kunoichi evaded. It wasn't a complete lie either, there was a slight breeze. After she was nudged in the side, Tsunade turned her head to see Naruto offering her his jacket. Tsunade couldn't help but be glad that he turned out so selfless after being dealt such a poor hand at life. Before she could decide whether or not to actually take the garment, Jiraiya suddenly dropped in front of her and Naruto. "Boolayaya!" the man yelled while waving his hands around crazily. The outrageous act had an easily expected reaction. Naruto jumped and screamed. He coughed afterwards, pretending as if Jiraiya's actions hadn't actually scared him. Tsunade's response was a bit cruder. "Baka, you fucking asshole," she exclaimed when she realized what was happening. Jiraiya didn't even have the chance to blink before he was nailed in the stomach. He didn't just stumble but soared and tumbled through the trees until he could no longer be seen. When Jiraiya didn't come back after a minute, Tsunade assumed he was messing with him. She signaled for everyone to move, and after what she did to her former teammate, no one wanted to argue. Minutes passed by and there was still no sign of Jiraiya. Tsunade had to hand it to the man. He was determined, but she was still pissed from the first time he scared her. While the sage wasn't stupid, he did have his moments, and trying to frighten her again would be one of them. Suddenly, several tree branches started to move. Several people stiffened. Guy turned around with a half-hearted smile while saying, "It's just the wind." He gave a thumbs up to further lighten the mood, but nothing he did helped. Everyone seemed to subconsciously begin walking close together. Ino and Sakura had linked arms. Akamaru whimpered as he walked side by side with Kiba. Shikamaru continued to look bored. Choji, well, he was nervously hugging a bag of chips. Tsunade and Naruto were still next to each other, and while Tsunade could control herself, Naruto kept skittishly looking over his shoulder. Hinata was as quiet as she usually was, so there wasn't much of a difference with her. Neji had the same stoic look he always wore. What the? The group turned around. Anko was now missing as well. "Oh Kumi-on," Naruto cried out. Before he could say anything else, a noise registered in his ears. It sounded like someone was asking for help. "Do y'all hear that?" He asked no one in particular. Sakura looked at Naruto with squinted eyes. "Naruto," she yelled angrily, thinking that Naruto too was trying to scare everyone. It wasn't past the blonde to play pranks. Naruto held up his hands. "I'm being serious," he quickly replied since he was not being in the mood to be hit as well. The same sound happened again, but this time it was much more audible. Someone was certainly calling for help. "Byakugan." Neji searched through the trees only to come up empty. "There's no one out there," he directed at Naruto. Naruto was about to give up, thinking he was just making himself hear things, but then it happened again and he ran towards the voice. "Damn it, Naruto," Tsunade yelled. He didn't always think things through and the woman feared that would lead to his eventual downfall. Naruto continued to run. As his speed increased, the trees all seemed to blur together. The voices became clearer as Naruto neared the edge of the tree line. He emerged to see 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, playing. There was also a tan man with his back to them while looking over the side of the cliff. The elder of the boys, who was on the ground with the other 2 sitting on his back, looked up at Naruto and whined, "Help me, Okawa-san." As a dramatic flair, he held out his hand and acted like he was suffocating. The younger boy and the girl laughed away. "Huh?" Naruto asked with one eyebrow raised high. The blonde looked all around him to see if anyone else was around for the children to be calling out to. A figure suddenly seemed to walk through him while saying, "Didn't I tell you not to start something with your siblings if you weren't willing to finish it?" Naruto screamed while throwing his hands out and kicking at the air. He was sure no one else was around except for those other 4 people. After the man turned around, Naruto was able to get an idea of what was going on. Hashirama Senju was facing the newcomer with a smile and shrugged slightly. "Kids will be kids." He held out his hand and the woman that Naruto now recognized as Mito stepped forward to take it. The kids continued to play as Mito leaned on Hashirama's shoulder and looked at the sunset. The reverie faded away when Naruto heard someone yell his name. "Naruto!" Ino ran out from the tree line. While she had partially trailed after him to make sure he didn't get into trouble, but also begrudgingly went because everyone else seemed to be too nervous to break away from the group. She wasn't one to talk to, she too had been nervous until she saw Tsunade ready to take off. It would be bad for something to happen to the only medical ninja in the group, so Ino said she'd handle it instead. "Baka!" Ino shouted before punching Naruto in the shoulder. "You need to learn to stop acting so rash." "See," she said while waving her arms around the area. "No one's here." Ino sighed before continuing. "Why'd you scream anyways?" she implored. It was a lot to explain, especially since he didn't know the Kyuubi's intentions with showing him the memory, so he sheepishly scratched at the back of his neck while replying, "It's kinda a long story," he concluded with a small laugh. Naruto then looked at the sunset. It would disappear in the next few minutes and bathe the land in darkness, so he wanted to savor the moment. "It's nice, isn't it?" Naruto asked. Ino looked at him confused until she followed his line of sight. The setting sun indeed was pretty. "Yeah, it is." Ino wondered how the sight looked from Konoha. Probably no different since they weren't all that too far away. The blonde used to love laying down in the flower beds near her house while looking up at the evening sky. A thought suddenly hit her and she wondered if Naruto had ever done the same thing. Ino looked at Naruto to ask at the same moment he seemed to do the same thing and got lost in his blue eyes. They looked different than when the small amount of light had hit them earlier. The blue hue wasn't as bright, but deeper. The sight of that and the colorful sky reflecting in them drew Ino close. Naruto was just as entranced in Ino as she was in his eyes. The remaining sunlight made Ino's hair look as if it was glowing and her eyes were doing the same thing as his. They both drew closer and closer together, eyes closed, but just before they could meet someone interrupted them and caused the two to jump apart. Akamaru sprinted out from behind the trees with Kiba on his back. "There you are, let's get out of here already, this place gives me the creeps." He looked at them with an odd expression when he noticed that they were both breathing heavily. "What's wrong with you two?" "Nothing," Ino replied loudly. Naruto quickly nodded along. Kiba shrugged. Whatever, let's just go back. Akamaru barked, then turned around and ran back in the direction he came from. Naruto awkwardly shifted on his feet while Ino avoided his eyes. So. The boy struggled to find the right words. He had no clue at how to reply to what just happened, or rather what almost happened. Ino turned around and walked back towards the trees. She was even more confused than Naruto was. They had actually almost kissed. The only person she'd ever imagined that happening with was Sasuke. Before she got too far, Naruto grabbed her wrist and stopped her from continuing further. Wait, Naruto said a bit louder than he had intended to. When he had Ino's attention, he quickly sprinted towards the edge of the cliff, close to where he had seen Hashirama and Mito standing with their children. Several flowers were blooming and he picked one up before running back to Ino. Ino's mouth dropped slightly when she saw Naruto holding out a flower to her. His eyes were closed and he was grinning goofily. She realized she must have stood there too long without responding when Naruto's expression fell. Sore, Naruto began to apologize while retracting his hand. No, Ino replied. She reached out and took the flower. It's beautiful, thank you. In all honesty, the flower was pretty ordinary, but the beauty came from the gesture itself. The two ran back. Naruto was excited when he could see the group, but the feeling faded when Tsunade pulled him towards her by the ear. Tsunade leaned towards Naruto's ear while yelling, "Stop running off, brat." When his ear was released, Naruto held onto it and groaned in pain. The act proved to be the perfect distraction for Ino to slip back into the front of the group. She wasn't completely unnoticed, however. "Hey Ino-chan, where did you get that flower from?" Sakura questioned. Ino touched the side of her head where the flower was. The blonde had put it there before she and Naruto began to run and didn't think anyone would notice. She blushing before replying, "Oh, you know, it was over there somewhere." Ino could tell that Sakura knew she was leaving something out, so she whispered, "I'll tell you later." Ino let out a silent gust of air when Sakura didn't ask anything more on the subject. Everyone seemed to be less intimidated by the so-called haunted forest for the time being. Jiraiya and Anko were still missing, but the ninja all still thought a prank was being played on them. When Naruto was sure Tsunade wasn't mad anymore, he slid next to her and asked, "Did one of your parents have two siblings?" Tsunade regarded the question with confusion. It was oddly specific and she couldn't figure out why Naruto would ask. "My Oto-san had a brother and a sister." Naruto nodded and tried to figure out which of the boys he had seen was Tsunade's father. The elder of the two had long red hair while the younger one had shorter black hair. They shared the same dark brown eyes and slender figures. Did he have long red hair? Naruto was playing a guessing game at this point while trying to figure out who was who. Tsunade began to reminisce about her father. She'd always loved his hair and when she was younger had wished it was passed on down to her. Yeah, it suddenly hit her that Naruto must have again been affected by the Nine Tails somehow. "Did the Kyuubi show you another memory?" Naruto nodded, but before he could respond any further the fox piped up. The letter was spoken with a sense of superiority. "Showed you nothing, boy. I don't control the memories. Whatever leaks into your consciousness is because you pulled at it." "I didn't pull at anything," Naruto silently replied. The Kyuubi growled, very clearly losing his patience. "Call it déjà vu. Years ago, to the day and time, when that woman acted as my vessel, she walked the same path you're currently on." While the answer wasn't bluntly put, Naruto was able to figure out what the fox was saying. That didn't explain one thing though. Why am I just now seeing these? If I remain sealed in you long enough, then you will figure it out. Naruto growled. What's that supposed to mean? He mentally yelled. I will affect more than one generation after you. The Jinchuriki could tell that was the best answer he'd get for the time being. The fox was done talking. When he looked to his side, Tsunade was still looking at him for a more elaborate answer. The fox told me it was from being in the same place as Mito. I guess years ago she was here too with the first Hokage and their kids. Naruto left out the last thing that the Kyuubi said since he didn't know what it meant anyways. Shikamaru had been thinking about everything that was going on. There was nowhere the missing people could have gone. Nowhere except. Stop, he told everyone. In turn, the group looked back at him. Neji, Hinata, direct your Byakugans to the trees. No one had looked up until that moment. While they usually jumped from tree to tree, that wasn't possible since Lee was injured. They had been on the ground the entire time. Teether, Hinata stuttered. Monkeys, Neji finished. He knew there were primates in the area but didn't expect to see what he was currently looking at. Naruto was the first to jump into the trees. The sight to greet him was unexpected to say the least. Jiraiya was being groomed by two monkeys while Anko was munching on an assortment of fruits and berries. Some unknown man was also up there and watching little monkeys jump around. "What?" he yelled, causing several more people to jump up and Jiraiya and Anko to look at him. Tsunade was actually speechless. She had no clue as to how to respond. At least the forest wasn't actually haunted. Kiba had to hold Akamaru back as the dog barked and tried to lunge forward. The monkeys weren't even fazed by the other animal. When Ino and Sakura jumped up, the two monkeys that had been tending to Jiraiya abandoned him and went to them instead. The one that went to Ino gently touched the flower in her hair. Neji and Hinata relayed everything that was happening back to the people that stayed on the ground. "Hey, no fair," the man complained. "Y'all are both up here, why?" Tsunade implored. She had finally regained her voice. Jiraiya and Anko both looked at each other. Since Anko's mouth was still full of food, the sage shrugged and replied, "I think it started out as a prank. Monkeys are mischievous, you know. I think they enjoyed the company. So you decided to hang out with monkeys instead of remain with us?" Tsunade asked incredulously. Anko held out her hands. "They have food," Jiraiya added, "that and they don't go punching people into oblivion." The man held up his arm to show Tsunade the gash that was there. Various cuts littered the rest of his body as well. Tsunade crossed her arms and looked on stubbornly. "It's not my fault you decided to try to scare me." He had survived worse and they both knew it, so the subject was dropped. "Okay, well, say bye to your friends. We've wasted enough time as is." Jiraiya and Anko were going to argue until the deadly look in Tsunade's eyes convinced them otherwise. Before Jiraiya could stand from where he was sitting on a branch, one of the monkeys pushed him back down and pointed at the cut on his arm. Since Tsunade did not feel like arguing with a monkey, she jumped to the branch next to the one Jiraiya rested on and healed his arm. "It's like old times, huh, Tsunade?" Orochimaru obviously wasn't with them and neither was Hiruzen, but the monkeys reminded Jiraiya of his former sensei. Tsunade rolled her eyes. "I am only doing this so we don't waste any more time." That was a lie. She would have done at some point if her former teammate hadn't antiquated himself with monkeys. When asked if he needed any help, the man that no one knew said he was alright with the monkeys and that he'd stay for the time being. Once everyone was on the ground, and the whole situation was put behind him, the group continued forwards. Jiraiya talked about the monkeys as if they were from some epic fairy tale. Some people listened, some didn't. Not much time passed before Akamaru looked behind him and barked happily. "It's another dog," Kiba announced before anyone acted out. Pakun, the ninja dog that Kakashi sent, ran by everyone and only stopped when he stood in front of Tsunade. Tsunade bent down and took the scroll that was tied connected to a sheath on the dog's back. Hope filled the kunoichi when she found out everything Kakashi relayed back to her in the note.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.